Yeah.
I think Kate's got that recording in there. He came in and said I was done. We've been recording since 2 o'clock. So Barb and I went in there to go sit, and she's like, is that recording? And I look over, and it's red, the red button, and I said, yes. So he went over into his office.
Good. Thank goodness she saw that.
I know.
Is he working for her? I think he is. Yeah. All right, thanks for that. Just so I know not to pick my nose. Hey, could you do me a favor in my office? I need to see if there's some paperwork for a new hire for me, Sherry's. Thanks for getting the air conditioner over to Dan. I'm sure they'll appreciate that as it warms up. Did you have your appointment yet? How'd that go? Progress. Yeah. Wow. Good. So, on the left side of my desk where my files stand up, there's a yellow folder in the right side of the stacking things, but there's also a manila folder that the ones that I bring my stuff back and forth. You know what I mean? Okay. Look in there and see if there's any new hire paperwork for it's Donna Dodge. There may not be anything because I may not have it. Yeah, I don't think I have it personally, but otherwise it would be in the yellow folder. The one that I was alluding to at the beginning of the conversation that was probably right behind that. Oh, sweet. Is her phone, oh, I thought it was a different name. Could you call Melissa and give her the phone number off of that? Do you have Melissa's phone number? Yes, that would be perfect. You can text her a picture of it or whatever you want. All right, great. Thank you, hon. I appreciate that. All right, I'll see you later. All right, bye. Hi there. Where do you usually sit? Because I just sat right here to plug in and stuff.
That's good to me.
No formalities, huh? Just so you know, I think
Even less than the planning board.
yeah, I think Hank heads to work,
Okay.
so his computer, his camera is all set up here and recording, I believe.
Okay.
Just saying.
Got it. Yeah. Trick to these?
No, I know on this one there's 2 locks, but
Yeah, I got both, but
Yeah.
it looks like it's still
and
working.
there's no. This one's good. Huh? Nothing that I know. There's no bars in the bottom for those break-ins we had, huh?
You know what's funny? Is Five Guys
Yeah,
has a drive-through,
yeah.
which I think I'm the only one that ever uses actually. But the drive-through window literally has like 6 different locks.
Seriously?
And one of them, most of the staff needs to go find someone else open for them. And the reason why it has that many locks is because it used to be a pharmacy.
I was gonna say, what did it used to be? It was Rite Aid.
Right.
Wonder.
So I keep telling them, you don't
You don't
have to
need
use
to.
all of those locks.
Nobody will, if someone steals your burgers and fries,
Yeah.
let them have. That's funny.
So are you okay with using your laptop for Zoom or?
Either way is fine
Okay.
because with Zoom, I don't have the owl or anything, so it just sort of shows my face if I put my camera. I'm just gonna leave my camera
Off.
off.
I mean, you can
but-
shut it off.
Yeah, but
Or
do
just
you
put
want
your
it
name.
on? Do you want the camera on and do you want to be on it? Like, is this going to be an interactive conversation?
No, because I think, one, the camera's not going to show everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think I would either, shut it off and I think then it'll just display your name or something. I think that would be
Right.
fine.
And then who's going to be zooming in?
At the moment, it sounds like it'll be George Regan.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Chuck Henderson
Okay.
is also going to join
Yep.
us, and Sarah Butterfield from the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition.
Okay. So they'll all be on there and we'll just,
Yeah.
do you want me to record it as well? So you have a recording of it for Hank?
Yeah, if you
Thanks
can,
for
and
being here.
more so for Jake who does the minutes.
Yep.
because I'm sure the camera won't pick up stuff on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually do record them unless someone specifically asks not to, just in case there's anything. And then did you see this box here that says Housing Commission? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got my copies.
Okey-doke.
Somehow I managed to collect 3 different New Hampshire RSA books.
Fun.
So I'll be returning those.
Who else is going to be joining today then? Everyone that,
I believe no one on the board just said they aren't.
okay.
So it'll be the 5 members of the board, there are 3 regular and 2 alternate.
Do you have sign-in sheets or anything for yours or not?
So far, there hasn't been,
Okay.
we've not
Just
had
curious.
any public
Yeah.
attendance. So we record who's present, the board, and if the public shows up, we'll record that.
Gotcha. Well, I'm happy to be part of this.
Yeah.
I hope we can just make a change, make some impact, right?
Yeah, I think, the trick is figuring out what, I was thinking about it. We don't have any quote-unquote rental units in terms of what is commonly rented. We don't have apartment buildings.
Right.
We don't have a few condos left, but really not very many. At least
Yeah.
those that are not second homes. And, you know, there are a few homes that have an apartment being rented out.
Potential, yeah.
But very few, I believe.
Right.
So in terms of that, kind of more like workforce housing, you know, single person apartment, two-person apartment, we just don't really have the infrastructure. And I guess I somewhat question the desire on the town's part to, you know, have a 25 or 50 unit apartment building go up.
Right.
If it were completely removed enough, you know, possibly, but and then that's sort of the one part of it. The second part of it is we just don't have single residence homes that are affordable to
Yeah.
young buyers.
That aren't short-term rentals.
Right. Or the short-term renters are gobbling up whatever
Yeah.
of that type.
Those
comes
smaller
available.
chalets type of thing.
Yeah, and you know, there's a state report that dispels some of the, you know, the fear of short-term rentals. And one point they make is that, 2 points they make. One is that it has not, it can't really be shown that it's increased rental rates. And rental rates have increased, but
But not as a result of
necessarily by short-term rental.
Related high.
It does show that.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm Ken Carter.
I'm Barb Campbell. We have met before, I
Pleasure.
think, in some other meetings.
We did. Didn't you recommend the painter to me?
Possibly Ron the painter or
No, John.
John Staples? Yes. How'd he do?
Lousy.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's so disappointing. I should show you the work he did for us. It's
No,
impeccable,
it was-
but, oh.
We got another guy who advertises in the paper. His name is, I can't think of his name offhand. He's
Yeah.
very, very good. Really
That's good. It's just crazy how. Oh, you're right.
good. If you got one, marry him. If you got a good one, marry him. For sure.
Oh, man. It's hard to find help, and then it's hard to find consistent good help that is
Well,
there.
there's just so much work and so few guys to do it.
Yeah.
And the valley still hasn't gotten beyond the guys just who think they're great carpenters but aren't. Or think they're great painters or floor guys or whatever the hell
Yeah.
it is. They're just not. So,
Absolutely. I hear you.
I hate to be blunt about it, but
No, it's true. I mean, it's a level of
it's
expertise.
years ago you could find somebody in this valley in an hour to come to your house and do some work, and you could.
Not anymore.
Your expectation would be good. I mean, your expectation is that they would do a good job.
Right.
No, not necessarily
And
the case.
we've used contractors that have been that, and then you use them again, and they're like, "What the hell happened?"
Well, and these days, just getting someone to come to your house
Yeah.
is a big win.
I'm trying to think of the guy's name, the painter. Jim Mickle is his name. He has an ad in the paper every day.
Okay.
He's exceptional. He's really
I
good.
just
And the
looked
other
at-
guy that's good is Jason. I know I have.
Fordham?
No,
Oh.
guy that used to work with Jeff Emmerich,
Oh.
who was an incredible painter.
Scott, do you mind if I turn on the light?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I turned on the hall lights, but
Well, you know, some people like the lights on and some people don't, but I'm one of those that does
Yeah.
like the lights on, so, I don't know if we need back ones, but.
Jason Young, that's his name. Really good painter. How you been?
good. How about you? How was your trip?
I had to cancel
Okay.
my friend, not to speak around, but my friend that lives in Antigua, a very close friend of mine, and he's also has a home in Florida. And he's there being treated for cancer now. And about a month ago, they gave him a clean bill of health. Told him the chemo work, the radiation work, go back to Antigua, we'll see you in 6 months. He made his reservations, called me up, said, "You coming down?" I said, "Yep, I'll be in Antigua next week to meet with you." I told Scott I won't be at the meeting, I'll be out of the country. And 2 days before I was to leave, he got a call from the doctor saying, "I think we better keep you here for another month."
Wow.
So I canceled my plans.
That's gotta be disappointing and
Yeah.
bad, so.
The other point that report made about short-term rentals is that they largely come from homes that are already vacation rentals or second homes, which I would say is probably likely since we have so many vacation homes
Sure.
in the state.
Odds are,
And,
yeah.
and to me, okay, that's a way of mollifying the concern, but I think the other way to look at it is every time a second home converts to a short-term rental, that's a lost opportunity to increase
Right.
the housing stock.
Right.
Unfortunately, that horse is out of the barn now. I was on the committee, the short-term rental advisory committee, which was a disaster, but I was still on the committee. And at that time, I did hours and hours and hours of research on short-term rentals. And if you drew a line and asked me what my conclusions were, it was not a good thing for the town, and it's definitely not a good thing for the valley. And this was pre-COVID. And I would go so far as to say my research was accurate. I don't think they've done a damn thing for this town. And yet, a lot of us use short-term rentals when we travel. So.
Yeah, I know, isn't that the funny part too? I mean, it's the irony, I
But that
guess.
doesn't mean we have to like it.
Uh,
I mean, in a little town like this, it's really the root cause of the housing crisis, in my opinion.
Hi Chuck, hi Sarah.
Hey Chuck, hey Sarah, how you doing?
I'm Barb Campbell, I'm just running the Zoom here, and I'm also the liaison for the select board, so it's nice to see y'all. And then Ken Carpenter is here as well as you see Scott. So I'm just gonna mute, and I'm also going to possibly stop the video because it's not gonna mean much when we have a group
If you
in here.
mute though, they won't hear us.
Oh, no, I'm gonna mute just until we get started at the
Okay.
meeting. Sorry about just for a few minutes. And then, because we're waiting for a few folks to show up still, so. You're welcome.
Were you expecting the others?
No one has said that they're not coming.
And Ken, just so you know, that recording is Hank's and it is on behind you.
Where's
So-
Hank?
It won't go in the minutes, but.
Where's Hank? Hiding?
I think he's working. He's been working a lot more hours lately
Oh.
at Grants, so
Okay.
he's trying to, I
I
think.
think I've seen him
cover
there
it. Yeah,
100 times.
100 times exactly. He's a nice young man. Yes, I was just talking to someone about one of the short-term rentals up on Tyrol and the noise and just.
That's how I got to live in, moved from Tyrol to Mirror Lake.
Mhm.
Because I was
And
surrounded
that-
by 7 short-term rentals. You can see from my one end of my deck to the other. And to be honest with you, we have a lot of problems up there.
Yeah,
So I love the house, I love Tyrol, I love
Yeah.
the view, but now I live at Mirror Lake and I love that view.
yep, absolutely. Think about what the community at Tyrol was like back in the day when all the chalets and the ski, everyone knew everyone and.
Same thing with the Whitneys, the
Mhm.
above Whitneys. So
Yep,
that was a very close second home primarily community, but all
Right.
skiers at Black, that came up
yeah.
almost every weekend kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I came up, I didn't have a place up here. I lived in Andover, Massachusetts. And I came up skiing, and I remember skiing at Tyrol.
Say hi, George.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hey, George. How you doing?
Chuck, I didn't know you were on the Jackson Housing Commission.
He's our newest member.
I didn't know anybody was on it.
There's a strong housing advocate that has become my pen pal, so
Yeah.
I'll listen to her.
I'm gonna start the.
Excellent. I love it.
And we're still waiting for other board members. I apologize to see that it is
No problem.
4 o'clock.
Recording in progress.
Which one is George?
Right here.
Chuck, I want to mention, tomorrow I'm going to see Maggie and John Randolph.
I heard, I saw Maggie on Friday.
Yeah.
I saw Maggie on Friday, and I was like, hey, I hear you're gonna meet up with Jackson.
Yeah, so, and I saw that Jean was there for the Harmony House opening.
Yeah, so who else going tomorrow? Sarah, you're going, right?
Yes, I'm going, and I think that Brittany Hodge is gonna be able to make it, but I've got,
There you go.
Watch yourself on the floor here.
Oh, that's great.
Hi, Campbell.
It's a great,
Hi, Nico. Nice to meet you.
they'll probably tell you that, you know, the original signing, I think was, by right, was 12 developable units. And through the transfer development rights and other zoning mechanisms, you know, to get the 44 tiny homes, which go under a different building code, of course. And having to, so it'd be great. I hope you enjoy touring them. So, and that's it's too bad because I'll be in Bedford, but I actually live like a mile away from there. So,
We're just waiting for one more, but why don't we go ahead and start the meeting? So I'll call it to
Sure.
order. We'll do a roll call real quick, and maybe just we'll introduce ourselves to you guys.
great.
So if you want to start.
I'll
I think
start.
Barbara, you already-
Yeah, I'm Barb Campbell. I'm the select board liaison.
I'm Nico Dubois, and I am the vice chair for the Housing Commission.
You know, Scott, I'm Ken Carpenter. I'm a member of the Housing Commission.
And over here off screen, I'm Jacob Campley. I'm the secretary for the Housing Commission. Nice to meet you all.
And we have George Regan from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, Chuck Henderson, who works with Jean Shaheen's office, Sarah Butterfield, who is the director of the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition. Thank you for attending, you guys.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for, well, I was gonna say thanks. It's always great to be up in Mount Washington Valley, but it just didn't seem to work out.
Yeah.
Although hopefully, what were the storms like for you guys last night? We had impending tornadoes, but nothing.
A big letdown.
Yeah.
Nothing. Not even any wind, let alone a tornado.
Really?
My gardens are ready to have no rain though. Like they're so drenched. Yes, exactly, very drenched.
I'm just grateful that, so I have to be careful because I don't want it to be a washout like it was last summer, but I've had, over the few years, stuff done, work on my house, and one of the things ended up tearing up a lot of back lawns. So I had grass, seed, and all that other stuff, and it's really hard to keep up with watering it. So the last few days, because I've been away the last few days, so having the rain, watering when I don't have to is great. But that ground is saturated. Like,
Yeah.
got plenty of water. So,
It's a good year for slugs.
Yeah,
yeah, really.
and ticks apparently as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, God. That's not good.
Yes.
So George,
I'm
maybe,
happy to be a part of this group and be able to help whatever I can. I really believe in either formal housing commissions or housing committees to help really keep the work going in communities with trying to deal with their housing challenges, and whether that's information or trying to connect with other people. Having a dedicated group of people that are focused on housing is super important. And so first, I just want to thank folks that are decided to be members of the Housing Commission to stepping into that, because, you know, there's a lot of great things, but housing is connected to everything else: community conservation, economic development, as you all know, and it can be complicated trying to do the right things and trying to hear what people think are right things. So appreciate your commitment, and I'm certainly willing to try to provide whatever knowledge I can, knowing that I'm not on a housing commission, but we know it's a great idea. That much we know.
well, and the context for us is that we really had some housing efforts going on for at least 10 years or so. But nothing really has transpired from that. And actually, it was the Housing Commission white paper that NHHFA put out that kind of inspired us.
Yeah.
And I think the idea, to some degree, you know, at its most basic, is that an organization like a Housing Commission both has a little more legitimacy, maybe, than, you know, a nonprofit might in a community. Has a little bit more, you know, what's the word? You know, we need to do something. We need to work. We're accountable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a little more accountable than a nonprofit would be, and along with the legitimacy, you know, likely to be around for longer, and, you know, have that kind of staying factor.
Right.
But all that said, we're all brand new to this, and so we're kind of, you know, looking for as much guidance as we can get. Can you give us sort of a thumbnail, you know, in looking at the NHHFA website? There's a lot that seems to be intended to help buyers in funding. Is that sort of the primary focus, or am I misreading that?
Primary focus of our organization?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, well, I guess I'll say fourfold. One, through our home ownership division, is to try to ensure successful home ownership, and especially for those first-time home buyers. So there's a lot of effort to try to have competitive interest rates, cash assistance offers. We're also trying to be inclusive and have sort of you know, first generation additional cash assistance for people that are new to coming to America and first time home buyers. On the rental side, trying to help people through housing choice vouchers to be able to stabilize their rent. And so a lot of work is around trying to help work with landlords to, number one, accept housing choice vouchers, and then for us to run part of the housing choice voucher program in the state. We've got, I forget the number now, but is it 6, 7, or 8,000 vouchers, and there's more throughout the state that are also handled by local housing authorities. So that, if you're not familiar, so housing choice vouchers, you know, it's money to help offset rental costs so that the tenant can make sure that not only can they afford rent, but everything else for living quality life. So that's through our assisted housing division. In multifamily housing, I'm sorry?
What are the requirements to be eligible for those?
Well, that is not an area that I have expertise in, but I can say Brittany Hodge would be someone you could talk to up here. So all of our programs go through local lenders. So when you think of who's up your way, Bank of New Hampshire, I forget who Brittany is with, but also go to GoNewHampshireHousing.org. So there's all sorts of things about the housing, about the cash assistance programs and all of that. So if you want more info, happy to give you a little bit more to connect with that. And if I can talk and do this at the same time, if you've been on our website, you might see that, but it highlights what our programs are. And then again, if you talk to someone like Brittany Hodge, who's one of many, you can find out more information about that from the home ownership perspective. But I'm going to see, since I'm on.
Just a quick interruption too. I don't know if you know, but Bank of New Hampshire does not do residential loaning and lending anymore.
Yeah, sorry.
No, isn't that crazy though? They used to be one of the bigger
You're not the only one.
content. Yeah, a bunch of them are backing out of that.
Right, absolutely. I didn't know that others were backing out, but so yeah, that's exactly. I mean, Evelyn Welton, who's on our board, was, you know, that's what she did.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's taking care of her husband.
I'll just jump in to say that Brittany is with Meredith Village Savings Bank,
Okay.
and she is on our board, and I'm hoping she'll be able to be at the tour of the Randolph's property tomorrow, Scott, so you may be able to speak to her then.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And I asked about the eligibility only because it's something I've heard, and I guess I don't know, I could be wrong, I don't know the particulars, is that in a town like Jackson, or even, the Mount Washington Valley, if it's a couple, they may have, some of if they have service jobs, which is really the most typical type of job here, whether it's restaurant, retail, etc., their combined income may not make them eligible for that type of assistance, but still makes them unable to afford to buy or rent, in Jackson or elsewhere in the valley.
The programs are all based on having a credit score of 620 or higher.
Right, but also they're usually based on some percentage of median income, I think, depending
Not for
on.
not for home ownership programs. I mean, in terms of what the program, in terms of the income limitation, but it's underwriting, it's basic underwriting. So no matter what, a borrower has to have the income to support the debt service.
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing is the interest rate, competitive? And does the interest rate change a lot as your FICO score is lower? And there's some programs like Freddie Mac where that we offer that they won't increase the interest rate based on a credit score. So these are nuances that help stabilize, especially for lower income borrowers. But you're right, so it's not a subsidy or anything. You still gotta be underwritten for the loan, but do we have an interest rate that might work for someone that comes in at 680 as opposed to 820 for a score, or 650 or something like that? And then secondly, getting qualified for down payment assistance, which is, again, if you're able to get a loan, you can look at and qualify for down payment assistance. But I think Brittany will be able to give a lot more detail, and certainly anyone from our home ownership division, New Hampshire Housing. Through Ahead and others, we do a lot of home buyer fairs. I think there was one up there a month or two ago. So that is, and so if you're seeing your role as a housing commission to also help disseminate information about where, resources are aimed at, a person or a family, then I want to make sure that we get that to you. And I think Sarah and the coalition is also a great resource to be a conduit for that information.
Yeah, and that actually led right to my next question, is how far your reach is in terms of, people knowing that those resources are available, or how many people just look at a home price and say, there's no way I can afford that, or, look at the interest rates today, there's no way I can afford that, and just walk away.
Well, again, I think it gets down to the home buyer fair. So
Yeah.
we do them all around the state and up in your neck of the woods at least once a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think to the extent Ahead tries to be a player in people understanding mortgage counseling, home ownership counseling, but the banks are really the main ones that are trying to do that, right? The ones that are doing mortgage lending are trying to get business, and part of that is to make sure that they're getting good qualified borrowers. So they're a key piece of that. And so with that, part of our product suite is one part of a bank's offerings, right? Some other banks offer their own other incentives as well. So I think the first thing is, I think anyone thinking about buying a home, if they want to do it on, one of the first things is, I'm trying to talk to a realtor, or trying to talk to a banker, or both. And the realtors are trying to make sure they get these potential borrowers to a bank, because they want to no one wants to spend time with someone who's just not bankable. But the benefit to is, again, something like Ahead and through our credit counseling programs, is that we give those folks some resources ahead of time. So maybe they're not ready now, but maybe they can be ready in a year or 2 years, whether they're trying to either fix credit or just kind of say, like, the reality is, what does it cost to buy a home in the Mount Washington Valley? And like other places, kind of hard to attain as well, which is an unfortunate, consistent issue all around the state, New
Another question, it's more to the side, I guess. In one of the reports that you guys put out, mentioned tax credits as an incentive for development or an incentive. What does the state allow in regards to tax credits and housing?
So it's the IRS low-income housing tax credit program, and so I could point to the investment project happening in Tech Village,
Yeah.
as well as Conway Pines, both of those developments right in Conway. And so those developers, it's a competitive process. Those developers, we get a certain allocation every year. I forget what the amount is, but it's several million, and that gets, because of the way the equity thing works, it works into, 30, 40 million or so over any given year to use as equity in funding the development of rental properties. And so, and I can also, I think, try to give you a little bit of, I'll give you the, so it's a competitive thing. We have a grant round, or a round every year. So that's there for anyone who's, so, and it follows a qualified allocation plan, which is a way of saying, how do you get points to score? Some of that's based on smart growth principles, location to population centers and centers of economic activity. Some of it has to do with supportive services, if maybe it's an age-restricted development. And so that money really goes to defray the cost of putting that building in the ground. So it's a sort of subsidy, if you will, to the developer, and the developer in turn is then going to agree to rent those units at certain specified area median income bands. Some of them may be as low as 30%, 50%, 60%, and some do income averaging to kind of get to that, which may in some instances also include a few market rate units. So that's all.
If there's blended population like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Because it all depends on the developer and how they're trying to make that happen. I don't know if Avesta has some of that or not. I think Conway Pines are all sort of income targeted, so there's none that are market rate. There's a few, like if you go to Claremont, the Goddard block, I forget how many units there are, so I don't want to make it up, but I think it's somewhere maybe in the 30s. There was about 4 or 5 of them that were market rate. And of course, interestingly enough, the difference between market rate and 60% of the area median income, which would be the upper echelon of tax credit, isn't so far off in some places. And because that income is derived from the area median income, which is what is that area? So the Mount Washington Valley area has a different income range than the Portsmouth Rochester area. So rents and incomes, or incomes that are based on that, and that's where the rents are derived.
How far down do you go to derive the rents? Is it the town or is it the valley, like you were mentioning? Is it county or?
It's the fair market rent areas. In some cases, it's the county. So I'm going to say probably when we're talking about Conway, it's Carroll County.
Right.
Because we're looking at the HUD income limits.
Yeah.
and that sort of speaks to the concern I voiced earlier that I'd say Conway is higher than Carroll County, or lower than higher than Carroll County in terms of income, and then Jackson would be higher
Than
yet.
that, but yeah.
But going back to the tax credits, I know that some towns in Massachusetts offer tax credits for residences that are full-time resident. And I don't
Full-time resident or full-time rental?
Well, full-time rental,
Oh,
or
okay.
whether it's owner or rental, as long as the home is full-time
Gotcha.
resident occupied. There's a tax credit for that. I think the Cape and a couple others, and I don't believe that's possible in New Hampshire. But I just wondered if I'm wrong, or is that something that is being looked at?
Yeah, there's no incentives that, I mean, other than, you know, the Invest NH incentives, municipal per unit, subsidy that has happened through the ARPA funds, there is no other real program. Did you say going directly to a renter or going to the development?
This would be to a homeowner, a single residence home even. If that home is full-time occupied, they then get a tax credit, or you could call it a tax penalty for those that are not full-time occupied. But they,
Yeah, right.
you know, to encourage, you know, to encourage using homes to the best advantage of the community, they offer that type of, you know, there's also a town, I think in Massachusetts, that's offering up to $20,000 a year annually to full-time rent your home as opposed to short-term rent.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of that, but, you know, communities, if they've got, say, a housing fund of their own, I think Portsmouth, I don't know how much money, if they have any money in it, but they had money for first-time home buyers to get them to be able to purchase. So if you have money, there are, I think, there are restrictions that I'm aware of, but you know, this is an area beyond my expertise, that you could try to subsidize that development. Right?
And for Jackson, you know, we're an affluent town, but we have a very small population, particularly small population for full-time residents.
Right.
And so that kind of money would really come down to, you know, a couple individuals that are willing to put up a sizable amount of money as opposed to the town, you know, supporting it in a larger fashion, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the challenge is that, you know, with the cost of housing, you even thought about this with accessory dwelling units, like, it'd be nice to be able to get beyond some of the upfront challenges, which might be 40, 50 grand in pre-development engineering and the like, and yet that money goes really, really fast, and you feel like I've helped so few people. It's a real challenge.
Yeah, and to me, the ADUs are sort of the lowest hanging fruit available. You know, it's the easiest kind of housing to add, you know, beyond doing a, you know, large apartment building or something like that.
Excuse me, what's an ADU?
It isn't.
Accessory dwelling unit?
Like a mother-in-law apartment.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Do you want to explain what ADU is if people don't know?
Yeah, I know what it is, accessory dwelling.
Okay.
And Jackson's fairly permissive. We allow
Right.
detached. We did just change our zoning so that if a property is being short-term rented, only one of the main house or the ADU can be short-term rented. You can't short-term rent both. But beyond that, I think we're pretty permissive. The question, it's more how to incentivize someone to add an ADU. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of costs both up front and in construction of it.
Yeah, we just built one ourselves, and it's $200,000 to $300,000 depending on what you're going to build, and that's at maintenance free, as low as we could do things and still be, nice.
Yeah, and
It's not.
It's also, we live in New Hampshire, we live in Jackson, we live at the end of long dirt driveways because we like our privacy.
So as a person who just built an ADU, what would you have thought would have been really helpful? So you built it, so you overcame all the barriers. What would have, because you're in those shoes, what do you think would have been the most helpful to you or someone who maybe had a little bit fewer resources?
I think being this was the first home that I had built myself, my husband and myself, we knew we were going to be laying out a lot of money, I guess knowing what the full extent of it would have been, and believe me, I'm counting my blessings because we had the luxury of being able to do this building, but I guess knowing what the end result was going to cost, because costs were fluctuating so much. We've been doing this over the past 3 years. It was finished a year ago, so 2 to 3 years ago, and with the costs fluctuating so much, I think that was one of the hardest things, materials mostly. I don't know, I mean, I'm in a position where I didn't have needs, so we built it to have an extra bedroom for when my family comes out here, and also my husband wanted an office of his own, so we had personal reasons to build it. We didn't build it to rent it or anything like that, but I guess if we were ever thinking of renting it, I think knowing what the market would be and what would be appropriate for it, cost-wise and then rental and income-wise. So I guess a case study of that, and how much can you rent something like that long-term. But I think where Scott was going before is if I was ever going to rent something like that out, it would be on a long-term basis, and it's just not something I would want to deal with personally.
Right,
So,
and if you look at our housing demographic, so to speak, you know, we don't have apartment buildings, we don't really
Right.
have many condominiums left. You know, we have mostly single residence homes, and typically you don't own a single residence home, you know, just for investment purposes, other than as a second home or a short-term rental.
And
but-
Jackson doesn't have any public sewers and things, so
Right.
that really prohibits us from, we don't have any, most homes are built with septic, so it limits you quite a
Right.
bit.
But it just, you know, there are some homes available for rent for one reason.
What?
Are you still there, George? Can you hear me?
No,
He didn't like that idea.
I guess, right?
We didn't get like time limited out, did we? It didn't.
No, I always set my meetings for 2 hours, so
Okay.
that's what I set for an hour, but it still shouldn't have. Wow, I think we lost the internet here.
Bummer.
Okay,
That's
going
all right.
back.
We've got a phone hotspot if you want to jump on that.
Yeah, actually, I think I'll do mine too. Thank you. Keep the conversation going. I just want to get back on my meeting.
I seem to have.
There's a nice picture of the ADUs that came up when I looked up ADU ready to go set.
Yeah, it looks like I lost
Yeah.
Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Color coded. Ooh.
We're back. We're back. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Oh,
Attached ADUs, and maybe if it could become more of an industry, maybe people could build them like manufactured housing. It might bring that cost down. But there is such reluctance to allow detached accessory dwellings, so it's great that
Yeah.
Jackson allows that, right?
I
So,
hadn't thought of that. It's an interesting business model where you allow someone to build, you know, a unit on your property, ADU, so that and I obviously probably agree to allow them to rent it, you know, for 20 years, 25 years, whatever makes sense.
right. So we had, God, my memory is just not great. It was the heck was his name? He's the backyard ADUs, so it's not Cole Peterson. We just had him at our home ownership conference, and my whole thing is like, okay, so if you can get, and this is all about allowing detached ADUs. So if you can allow detached ADUs in my area, where do I come up as a homeowner? Where do I come up with the money to buy it? So do I have equity, and do I have income? Because it's got to be bankable. I've got to have collateral, and I've got to be underwritable. And if that's even a word. And if I don't, I've still got this parcel of land where maybe a developer could build it, but what's their collateral stake if they don't? Because I can't subdivide the property, right? It's an ADU.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can, I can do that. But my point is to have it in mind. And one of the things that he mentioned was, well, you know, you could. There's nothing against having a land lease and like land and building lease, where you've signed that document where, you know, the developer doesn't own it, but they're going to get some of the rent through an agreement for several years. And so my capital outlay probably isn't zero, but it's not 300,000. And they're bearing the brunt of some of that, and they're being paid through, not you, but however you rent it out. So it is predicated on a rental model where you're, or something. I mean, maybe you can afford to pay it over 20 years yourself as opposed to a mortgage. And so I found that kind of fascinating, and he talked about it a bit at our home ownership conference. And if I can at all find this person, I think this is it Danley? Just trying to, or is that Stanley? No, this is not right. I'm just going to drop this in here. So for whoever's, Sarah, anybody who's collecting all these speculative ADUs, but the one thing, it could be interesting that it doesn't give money. So what I hear from people that are trying to do ADUs, and we just heard it too from Barbara's, like, you got to have that money, and so that is a big thing, that having pre-approved plans or an expedited approval process doesn't. It might save you time and a little bit of money, but maybe not a lot for maybe someone like me who's just, you know, I can spend that money or I can invest it, or you don't have a ton of choices. But what does it do? What does it do to my property value? And can I freeze my property value? And that's where the Community Revitalization and Reinvestment Act 79E might be a playable thing, where you say, I want to build an ADU for long-term rental, and there's some provisions there in 79E. We're working with a consultant to kind of work through these things, because there's a lot more provisions that have been added over the years, and this year, which allows conversion of office to residential. But you could freeze the property value of that home, that residential property, for a number of years. And that might be somewhat of an incentive to homeowner. I don't want to stereotype, and you've said that Jackson homeowners have income. So maybe saying, you know, if you can freeze my property value, because what I don't know, and this is in talking with assessors, like, you know, in an attached ADU, sometimes I'm not sure how much the value of a house improves, because its highest and best use is a single-family home. But when you've got this detached unit, that's different, and I'm curious if that's enough of an incentive. And so the town has to say, well, we're not getting additional taxes, and so what's the cost? And that's a valid question. But if also the policy is we're trying to get more diverse families, well, it meets that, and then you know over a certain period of years that home is going to be taxed at its newer value. So it's kind of a debate about what's policy versus revenue, and that I think always invites a deeper look at where does our revenue come from, and revenue potency, like value per acre, as opposed to just the gross tax bill of a home.
I assume not, but you know, Jackson couldn't assess properties with detached ADUs as if they did not have an ADU if they were full-time occupied.
They could under. I'm not sure if I'm following that. Say that again.
So if a home in Jackson had an ADU, but they're going to full-time rent it, do long-term rental with it, could the town assess that property as not having an ADU, therefore a lower property value and a lower tax?
Yeah, that would be the 79E. So you would value it at its before it was built. Say we're going to hold the value.
It would be new.
And what is that program again? Or
that's RSA 79E.
79E. Got it. Okay.
So take a look at that and just see. And that may be something that, in your role as advisory to the planning board and select board, might be some food for thought to explore.
Yeah.
And as I said, we're not done, but we've contracted. I don't know if the folks know Judy Bartlett, who's a consultant. She's been working on the Housing Opportunity Planning grant. And so we're using her to kind of work through that and sort of say, how does this work? What's the practical application for town? So it's not done yet. Be two things. One, take a look at that, and then maybe, be friends with Ryan over in Conway. I know they're doing an element of 79E. So he might be a good person to talk to, and maybe the folks at North Country Council, like Angela or Michelle, and maybe just picking their brain for that, some information on that.
Okay.
Can I ask how long is the freeze period for the valuation of the home typically? Is that like the length of the loan that might be taken out to build that unit? How does that work?
Yeah, wow, I was not prepared for this. I feel like I'm taking a SAT.
We promise not to quote you.
And my tendency is to make it up if I don't know it. No, that's not true.
Just like AI.
Yeah.
There are limits, and I forget with workforce housing, like if you decided to, if you allowed this program to happen and say, we will grant the homeowner X number of years if they rented at workforce housing rates. I think it's like 8 to maybe 14 years,
13.
but the town can choose it, so that's a maximum. The town could choose and say it's only for a certain amount, but remember, for every years of restriction, it makes it perhaps less likely for a homeowner to do that based on the financial situation of their financial situation.
Right.
So it's about trying to get that sweet spot of saying what might that be and how much might that incentivize a homeowner to kind of do that in this long-term rental kind of scenario.
Do you see something else I saw in one of the reports about employers establishing or funding a housing trust? Are you seeing much of that?
So I'm not, the center of knowledge or getting information on that. You said two things, and I'm not sure if they go together. I've heard of employers like John and Maggie Randolph that are building. I have heard of Evernorth as a recipient through the Upper Valley. There's a employer-based fund that's been set up to help provide funding, whether it's a grant or a loan. I believe it's a loan, so it's a repayment and an interest rate. The corporate council has been a leader. Clay Adams, who's the president of Mascoma Savings Bank, would be a person that you may want to talk with, as well as, and there's the new president of Evernorth, Evernorth is a bond syndicator, but they have been helping to sort of say, okay, if area employers are putting money into a fund, how do we use that fund to help incentivize or be sort of like a tax credit, like put in some kind of gap financing or gap funding to make the development of some kind of units worthwhile. The North Country Council is definitely exploring a lot of employer-assisted housing initiatives. We've been partially funding some of that work. Kayla Tavares was the person who was running that. She has left North Country Council. But Angela, is it even Angela? Is that her name?
Yeah, Cleveland.
Yes, thanks. Angela Cleveland is now taking that over, and Harrison Kanzler is also involved in that work. So I would talk to one or both of them about their experience of what's happening with employer-assisted housing. Up in Lancaster, Pact Solutions has started building their own or renovating some of their own, some previously unrented or unoccupied apartments for their staff, as well as helping some people get into home ownership. And for those of you that watched any of our videos, there was a whole story about that.
Yeah, I used
You
to work
guys
there.
watched- Oh, you did?
Yeah, I worked for PAC for a while.
Okay.
So the owners are very, they're very motivated and financially able to do things like that. So it's really been a rejuvenation for that area.
And there's a restaurant here, I was gonna say, there's a restaurant here in town that
Yeah.
that is building, just started a project to build some units for their own staff. They happen to have a large, a lot of extra land that they can work with. But it's,
Yeah, and when I saw saw Maggie on Friday, we were at a design charrette, and we were in Portsmouth and Service Credit Union. It's a bank that has a bunch of acres, of which about 11.5 are buildable, and they're trying to see what they can do and to try to build housing. It's going to be a partnership with developers and other people, but they've got the land and ways to try to make something more affordable, because you can't build something and take a loss. It's still got to be bankable.
right. And that's with the building costs so high, that's a real challenge.
Yeah.
That's such an unfortunate thing about this time. There's such headwinds with not only materials, but the cost and availability of labor.
Yeah,
And labor up in your area, I think there may be a lot of it, but there's a lot of they're kind of tied in for a number of years, right? Between commercial and residential development.
well, my wife and I finally broke down and got some heat pumps or.
Mini splits.
Mini splits.
Yeah,
We signed the contract in February, they were installed in October.
yeah. Same year? Wow.
Yeah, same year, wow.
Yeah, see, but luckily, some of the things that I had done in my house over the last couple of years haven't run into it, but someone said something poignant in a multifamily housing development, and I think this happened to a developer, Jack Avenue Development in the western part of New Hampshire, where, he couldn't get transformers, but someone was saying, you can get the hardware, but you can't get the chips to run things.
Yeah.
And it's and Chuck, you know this, because Senator Shaheen, I think, had to really intervene in some of this stuff to kind of get stuff moving, and it's these weird pain points that just sit in development on hold.
Yeah, we saw all kinds of projects held up, transformed, or, some little connecting widget. It's
Right.
ridiculous. And so that sort of supports the whole Chips and Science Act, where we need to make those things here again.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the Randolphs, how, do you have any suggestions how a town like Jackson would attract a developer like that?
I would ask them.
I will, for sure.
Money.
I think, for them, so I don't know how many acres so they did two things. So they've got a small development in Durham, required a couple of variances. They did, for some of their staff, they may have 7, 8, 9, 10 units.
Mhm.
And, so if I was to feed you some things, I don't know what research you've done on them, and maybe you're both going to both places. I'm not sure where you're going. I assume you're going to back road of the 44 units.
I believe so,
Maybe the
yeah.
other place
Yeah.
So they've got a smaller development in Durham that has
Right.
a daycare facility on it, and Durham, being the town that it is, gives a lot of incentives for age-restricted housing. So they had to go through, I think, a variance process to allow it not to be age restricted, but in the end, they've got this really nice, small development that's, doing its little part, so that when they attract a workforce, they've got, in some cases, places for some of them to live. Now, their staff is way more than any of those developments, and in the case of the 44 tiny homes, they're not all just for their employees.
Right.
So it's and I don't know how they've done that, and it's also rent restricted based on HUD rents, and
Right.
that all happens through the Dover's TDR mechanism. So hopefully, if you're out there visiting with them, either they'll talk about it permit to maybe talk about how they made that happen. So when I say the 44 units, I'm like, I don't know Jackson well. I love going there, stayed at Christmas Farm Inn ages ago, where we make memories. But I don't know if there's how much land there is. I mean, so much of it is in the forest. And you and I, Scott, talked about, and I sent you something like, is there some agreement you can have with the Forest Service or whoever it is that owns that land?
Yeah.
That might allow some buildability on it. And that was something that my boss's boss, Rob Davis had mentioned, which I think I sent you a while back, but I don't went up to know.
Yeah, even though the Forest Service owns, 75% Jackson is national forest, and we're surrounded on 3 sides by national forest. So there's plenty of national forest land. The program that they, under the home bill, I think is running, really is targeted at property that's already been used by the Forest Service for some purpose, like a garage or not pristine, undeveloped property. The other possibility is, I believe the Forest Service at times is willing to do land swaps. And we do have a property owner that actually provides some of Jackson's only affordable housing, who is just subdivided her land and is intending to give or sell that land to the Forest Service. That land is probably not very developable because of it's so wet and steep, or where it's not steep, it's wet. But there is a piece in another location that maybe we could arrange a swap for, but that's as far as I've gone with the Forest Service.
That owner will get, she can. I think it's. Do I know this because there's like 3 or 4 rental. I don't want to call them cabins, but they're kind of long, right? Is that what you're talking about?
It's actually 2 properties. There's one property is an old lodge that had its own very small ski area, really primarily for the lodge, the people that were staying at the lodge, and that had a couple outbuildings. That lodge and a couple outbuildings have been turned into rental. And then the owner of the property then built a 4-unit, very modern tiny home development that's gone quite well.
I actually visited, and we visited with a renter. I think her name was Barbara.
Barbara Terrier.
Barbara Terrier. Yep.
What is it?
Yeah.
Is that her name?
Yep.
And she was the woman who greeted me when I stayed at the Christmas Farm Inn. And she is still the same most hospitable woman then as before. And we were doing a film with someone, we were trying to film some of this stuff, and he made a comment on the way home, and he said, boy, because she made like muffins. And he said, those muffins were great. I said, man, those muffins could have been made with sand and they would have tasted good, because she's just such a warm human being. So as you can tell, I have a visceral response. I mean, like,
and
old enough where it was Sidna Zeloff that owned Christmas Farm Inn. But that woman was the person that greeted you, and God, what a wonderful human being. But also what a great development that she lived in. Like, it was really smartly built and really inviting. It was very, very cool. And thank God the owner decided to do that, right?
Yeah. And part of that smartly built is the particular contractor that they worked with, Curtis. What's Curtis's last name?
Is that Curtis?
Curtis. I'm spacing out his last name, but he's a very, very smart contractor. And actually Barbara was my across the street neighbor until she moved into that unit. And
Oh, wow. Small world.
yeah.
She knows everyone.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
She knows that, and she's on the cemetery trustee, so she knows everyone dead and alive.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of tiny homes, I think, have a fairly positive, neutral to positive reputation. Mobile homes here in Jackson have a very negative reputation. In fact, we have a zoning that says no mobile home parks are allowed.
You can have a mobile home, but you cannot have
Right.
multiple mobile homes.
That's correct.
Right,
Oh, great.
yeah.
That makes
And,
sense.
you know, and I know that's come up in one of the reports, and also I think one of the presentations that the Mount Washington Valley Housing Council gave, that, you know, to some degree, towns may need to get over
Mhm.
their snobbery. But
Yeah, well, there's new state legislation, I don't know if it's signed yet, it's supposed to allow, you gotta allow all three, like subdivision in its own land and in a park. So to that end, and, because I was gonna say, when we were talking about ADUs on the rental side, they're sort of like maybe one of the last bastions of rental opportunity that might be affordable and as incremental development as opposed to putting up 28 units somewhere, which just wouldn't scale well. But the manufactured housing, the new manufactured housing is way more attractive. New
Absolutely.
Hampshire recognizes it as real estate, not chattel. And as I put in there the link to Communities and Consequences, where we talk about who is workforce housing and what, but we're also working we're working on some episodes about manufactured housing and showing that, yeah, like whatever gives it a bad name in Jackson, that park or parks will not be going away in the short run. But what would it look like if it was newer?
Right.
And and by the way, even manufactured housing isn't inexpensive anymore either.
No
It's
kidding.
200, but it's more attainable than other things, all things being equal. And again, it's some of the benefits of being manufactured off-site. But there's a new type of manufactured housing called cross-mod. And when you look at some of that development, it looks like your starter home Cape. So it's got opposing angles as opposed to a long double wide. And so we're going to try to feature that to at least say, look, you can't do anything about some of the things that you drive by every day that don't look good, but we also want you to realize that manufactured housing of today is not the housing of last resort. So I sound like a messenger in it, but as I've been exploring this, I've heard anecdotally from people that are like, yeah, I was looking at this manufactured housing park, and this place is adorable, and I want to live there.
Yeah.
They're not doing it because they can't afford to live anywhere else. And I found that a story element that I think would be worth talking about. That it's not necessarily housing of last resort, it might be housing that's really desired for a lot of reasons, especially those that are residentially owned, so that you can kind of control your destiny. But
Yeah, but even less expensive, at least what I've seen, are containers that have been turned into homes.
Yep.
And some of those look very modern, and so they don't have that mobile home look to them. But are probably cheaper even than most other manufactured housing.
And also,
that I'm not seeing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, even with the Jackson's restriction on mobile home parks, there's I would say a big crossover of ADUs that like you could a lot of the manufactured homes could be ADUs.
Right.
Do you know of any towns that restrict, the mobile home park of old that we all think of, but allow more modern type manufactured housing, and how they do that?
Well, I mean, if you allow manufactured housing in a park, there's not an age. If you allow it, you would. I'm not sure what you're saying. Like manufactured housing in a park, there was let's say pre-1976 and falling apart. It's still enabled because someone allowed a manufactured housing park to be built. So if I allow it today, it's not going to be populated with 40-year-old manufactured housing units because you can't move them if it falls apart.
Right. I guess it was just, because we all have this vision of what that looks like, even if it's in error. Is there a way to, I think if we were to go before the town, assuming we could get it through the Board of Select people, completely removing our manufactured housing zoning restriction probably would, 50-50 chance, I would give it at best.
Well,
But-
I also look at some of the properties that are in town that have been here for a long time that are in such shambles, you know, so who's to say that a property with multiple units on it would not be better looking than some of the places there are now?
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that has to be more than just a concept, but a view for people to see. And, you know, I remember back when the 4 homes were being built. Had been coming up here, I hadn't lived here full time yet, but I remember the talk, the pros and cons of that. And it was incredible how much public interest and comment there was about 4 homes,
Yeah.
about 4 homes. It was just incredible. So, I think that presentation is so important on anything. If you say mobile home park, yes, 95% of the people are going to think of something that looks like a 1960s mobile home park. But if you present something about tiny homes, that sounds so much more modern or even manufactured homes or whatever. So
I'm just wondering if
No,
there's a way to
it's
sort of
interesting.
replace that zoning with something that specifies the tiny homes,
yeah,
you know, even though they don't really exist anymore, still just for, you know, for
Yeah.
marketing
Yeah.
purposes,
yeah.
restricts
This
the
is
old
where I
side.
want to invoke Ben Frost, and again, for those that know him, I am not him, but I would say that, you know, there is specific language around manufactured housing that you can't get away from, but you would have to sort of say that. But I think, and I forget the gentleman I see in the tie-dye, but, you know, you're right, off-site,
Nico.
off-site build homes that are smaller are definitely like, if you could, like you guys, if more people would allow detached use this as an opportunity to make this business kind of happen, it might be much smaller. Those might be 600 square feet, as opposed to these larger manufactured housing things. But they can look good, and I guess, and that's why we wanted to do this video in a series of small episodes. It'd be like, look, this is what it was, and this is why people don't like them. But here's what they can look like today, and here's a bit about some of the people that are living in them. And one of the things I'd like to ask a developer would be like, if it was allowed, like, what would the conditions need to be for you to actually do a manufactured housing park? Like, what's the economics of it look like? And then on the other side, you as a town would want to know, well, is that a drain on tax revenue or is it not? And at least in one case, and for those that have been following some of our studies we've done with Joe Manicosi from Urban 3, we've been looking at not the parcel tax bill, but the value per acre and what that brings for tax revenue. And Todd Horner in Southwest Regional Planning Commission did that on a manufactured housing park that I think was residentially owned. Discovered its value per acre exceeded that of a single-family development. So a lot of single-family developments. So it's interesting to know that, to also look at the dollars and cents of it and say, you know, to the extent that you do that, you know, what might that bring in if you had 10 units of manufactured housing on X number of acres? What might be the value per acre of that value? And that's revenue to the town.
Yeah, and that 4-unit development, I believe what made that work is the owner already owned the land that was put on, and I believe it sees a very marginal return even on, you know, the investment in constructing the homes. Yeah, so it was a very philanthropic effort, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think Barbara told me what the rent was, and it's now been 7 years, but it was like $700 or something. It's probably not that now, but very, very low.
I think it's 800 or so. I think it's about half market rate. Although it's funny because the owner will quite loudly proclaim that she does not do affordable housing. She does not do workforce housing. She really sees herself as community housing, I guess you'd put it. Her intent is to bring young people, and there's like with Barbara, there's a mix, you know, of residents there, but you know, to allow people to live in Jackson who otherwise couldn't, but will be a positive, part of Jackson. And she actually, I now believe, lets the current tenants pick the new tenant whenever a property, you know, one of the units becomes available.
Oh, interesting, yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of wisdom in our terminology, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't use really workforce housing or affordable housing.
Yeah.
I sort of like to have an organic conversation, which is like, who are we missing and who do we want here?
Right.
And how do we make it affordable for them?
Right.
And that's community housing.
Yeah, and going back to, land available, there's not a lot, but, there are some large parcels. Some of them are landlocked. And I know of one that, is fairly far into, taxes owed. And I don't know, if it would make sense to a developer or they needed to put in, a road to provide frontage, for a property that's landlocked. There's one piece that's 60 acres, and who knows? Maybe the owner, who I think simply intends to log it, maybe they would split off 5 or 10 acres in return for all taxes waived, up until now, back taxes waived, and
Right.
something like that.
So as a housing commission, that's an interesting project that might be worth some of your time to try to explore that, because maybe the planning board doesn't have time to do that. Select board certainly doesn't. I mean, that could be an interesting thing to, number one, talk to some developers about how could something like this work, and then what are things on the town side that might have to be done to make something feasible.
Yeah, and that was my question about GSD is, what help did they need from the towns that they've developed in, given the cost of construction, given the cost of site development.
I think you'll discover that I don't know what their own internal scheme was, but they didn't get any direct subsidy from anybody.
Really?
What they ended up, the thing that I can't explain at all in Dover, especially, is the transfer of development rights. I know what they are, but there is a cost to a developer to build big housing, and that cost diminishes as you get smaller. And somehow the smaller that goes, the more economically viable it becomes for a developer. So John and Maggie could squeeze in 44 units. They're tiny homes, so they're Appendix Q of the building code or whatever. And that means different height of rise and stairs, different widths, different all of these things. The health safety factors, none of that was encroached upon, but somehow they made it work. The thing that I'm always careful of with them is John comes in and kind of made his own construction company now. As the owner, of Christmas Farm Inn, they have the expertise to do that. So they came with some specific, and she's an architect, for Pete's sake. So there was some things that came with it. But I would say that maybe not direct subsidy, but the way that the city of Dover specifically allowed them to do something, they could get it built. I think Durham might be a little bit different in terms of, again, not really, it's just what the town allowed them to do, but they didn't give them any real basic incentive to do it. And of course, remember that for their equation, they're looking at, and you can ask them this, how does it mean for drawing in new employees? Because
right.
There's a lot of employers that are I'll give you a $20,000 signing bonus. They don't necessarily have to do that if they've got a place for them to live, because people are saying, you got a place for me to live? And increasingly impactful, because it's not a nasty place to live, it's an attractive place to live.
Right.
But granted, both of those choices are not where I may want to choose to live. And so, it's not the panacea, but it is one part of a larger housing solution.
And do they do just rentals, or do they do any deed restricted sales?
In both of them, they're all just rentals, and you could talk with them about that, because they have to make a choice about that. And I think what it comes down to is it's difficult to to sell it and to be able to repay the kind of cash and equity that needed to go into it. But they would be better able to tell you, because I would ask them that, because they contemplated it, and there was some decision point where they said, it's better off for us to own this, collect the income, and pay off debts. Like,
Yeah, and you know, the 4-unit development that we have, you know, it's great. Jackson needs it. It really does a lot of good for Jackson. But really, Jackson's biggest pain point is the ability for a young couple or family to purchase a property and to make Jackson their full-time, you know, resident, or their forever residence.
yeah, and I know that you're not alone, but like, it's one thing on the rental side, but that home ownership side is super difficult everywhere.
Yeah. Well, we're Jackson is, New Hampshire's what, the first or second oldest state in the union. Carroll County, I believe, is one of the oldest counties in the state, and Jackson, I believe, is the oldest town in Carroll County. Our median age is somewhere around 59 now. And yeah, we have a volunteer fire department that now needs to find people from other towns who are physically capable of, you know, some of what they need to do.
Right.
You know, we're an aging town, and looking to, you know, our fondest hope in terms of housing efforts is to revitalize the community and to let young people move back in and make a home here.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of. I think it's a challenge, especially for homes. So the thing would be like, how do we allow the opportunity for small homes to be built that also are going to be attractive to that wide range of demographic? Because not everyone's having kids, but it doesn't mean that they only want one bedroom, because they want friends and family to come over. So, you know, again, a housing commission could do a lot of work in trying to not just query people, obviously in Jackson, but around the area, and in partnership with the coalition, you know, could probably get some funding to do that, if that was some of the work that you wanted to help spearhead for Jackson through the housing commission.
When Maggie was at North Illinois at that appendix Rampor, I asked her about, you know, 2-bedroom economical unit, and she said they have a design for one. So, you know, that would make sense in a lot of places. You know, very much a cookie cutter but cute little unit. Two bedrooms make a lot of difference. You can't be a hoarder if you're going to have a place like that.
Very true.
Under control.
Right.
Right, because if you have space, you want to put something in it.
Yeah.
But, you know, thanks, Trevor, for bringing that up, because I think that's a great point for you guys when you meet with them tomorrow about their other stuff. What I do find it interesting, so I mentioned how some of it to me I was very, you know, I was like, this is really hard, not a lot of it is replicable, but they do bring expertise and are talking with towns, and you're right, Chuck, like what does a town want, and just at least talking about some models, so they are a good person to bounce things off of, like that. And again, even with their childcare, because that's, you know, as we all know, like, second to housing really is childcare. And Trent-Fisher's keeping childcare for sure. You know, a shortage of vacancies for childcare and a shortage of childcare workers. And so we need places to house the childcare workers and then places for childcare to be delivered. And you know, they were able to, in their small unit in Durham, like, work with a franchised childcare provider, and it was a win-win. So that was fascinating. So they've got a lot of great things to share. I think you'll, you know, beyond the tour, have a lot of good opportunities to talk about other things they're involved in or working on, and maybe what their expertise or counsel can be to be helpful for you folks in Jackson.
Do you have a question, Ken?
No,
I have a sort of a technical question. Is a tiny home considered a mobile home?
No. Manufactured, and it wouldn't, So, and I'm gonna say manufactured home. And a manufactured home comes with HUD standards about design and development and all of that. And tiny homes do not necessarily have that.
Okay.
We have one in Jackson.
I know in the past, they've, like when they first became a big thing, they were always on wheels and you could take them and move them.
That
And
one's
so-
down,
But
that's
that's,
down there where you live on Malone Road, that little log home there.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's okay to have a single mobile home on your property.
Right.
It's just, you can't have a park or maybe
Right.
multiple.
But I don't even think that's movable.
Yeah, I think there is a distinguishment now that it's basically just a tiny home. It's not a tiny mobile home.
I think all homes are movable if you try hard enough. but
Yeah.
And the other big distinction is in manufactured homes, like they're not mobile. Like once they're in place, they are
Right,
in
they're there.
place. And
So if we just say no RV parks.
That's right.
well, I'm not a big fan of the tiny house language because I think it meets with a lot of disdain and interest. But small homes on small lots, that's, to me, I'd ride the tiny home wave to get these small homes on small
Yeah,
lots.
yeah,
Because that's what we're missing. And it's still expensive to build small homes on small lots because lots are expensive.
sure is.
And a toilet is a toilet, whether it's
Yep.
in a
Septic
400 square
or-
foot house.
Yep.
Yeah. So those things, are real, but
Do you guys have any other
One
questions?
last
Oh,
thought.
I want some comments.
The Tillotson Fund started a pretty creative little program. I think they threw $8 million into it, and there are 4 parts to it to help incentivize some housing and for home ownership. One of the parts is, down payment assistance, which is, sometimes that's the stumbling block that people otherwise could be qualified to buy a home. So they're doing that through AHEAD. They have a very tight partnership with AHEAD. They also have another program to take, old large homes and turn them into, 3 or 4 apartments, but AHEAD will fund all the design work and all the upfront scoping of it at no cost. So that is our program. And I think that may only be in the Tillotson service area, but it's a model even poverty. So just find some person who left a charitable endowment of a couple $100 million.
There you go. Let me go to my list.
But I think, I can't imagine that Jackson doesn't have a lot of people that would, if you passed the hat up there and said, okay, you know what we're into for housing, we've got to do something, can you throw something in? And I bet you could get, a couple 100,000, by the end of the day, by time the first cocktail.
Actually, it's 5:15, we're past that. Next cocktail.
Well, and my thought, and I might be wrong, is that, getting people to donate land might be a little easier than
Than
cash.
dollars.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
well, the Housing Commission can accept donations of land, so there you go.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was part of the reason to start the
I'm
housing
all
commission.
over that idea. I think it's great.
Okay, thank you all.
All right.
Goodbye.
Bye,
Yeah.
Chuck.
Yeah, I have to sort of head off in like a minute or two too, but I'm happy to keep reconnecting to be, for whatever way I can be helpful. So let me know.
Yeah, I'm
Sure.
just making sure I have other resources here too, that you had shared, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I can always follow up too. There is a lot of stuff on our website. Our website isn't the easiest to navigate.
It is a little confusing, George.
No, I think I appreciate that. It's confusing.
I spent hours on it.
It's not
I have spent. Don't say that.
Like, the Housing Commission guide's gonna be under publications, and
Yeah.
stuff on ADUs is gonna be under housing challenges and solutions. Like, I don't know, there was wisdom somewhere a decade ago.
We promise not to call you for technical support.
That's not me.
Well, thank you, George. We really appreciate your time.
Yep, good
Yeah,
job.
thank-
Thanks, George.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah,
Yeah, great
too.
to talk with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for being on the commission. Give me a call, Sarah, whatever, and happy to help.
great.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for
Do
including
you
me,
know who
guys.
owns that house on Malone?
Yeah.
I don't. I've never seen it on
Excited
there.
to
You
see
live right there, right?
tomorrow
Yeah, yeah.
for the tour.
Do you know what kind it is?
Yeah, have fun at the tour.
I'd love
Take
to know.
pictures.
I know. It's
Because
good
it's a
fun.
Will do.
development.
Thanks so
of
much.
those units over in Lincoln.
All right,
Who's
bye.
that?
Have you seen
Bye.
that on the right?
Sarah?
Oh, sorry, sorry.
Okay.
That's not the one
Fast
as
food my
you
mouse
as you
there.
cross over 302 into Bethlehem, right? That's
On the note of the tour,
I've seen, no, I'm talking in Lincoln.
anyone is
I've seen
interested in going as well, I think that's fine. Sarah mentioned that
Where is the tour?
Southern New Hampshire,
Got you.
Dover, I think.
Interesting.
I hadn't put it out there because I thought she was gonna have members of her board go.
Yeah.
And I didn't wanna, have a huge group, but it doesn't sound like it's gonna be much beyond her, so if you guys want,
I spent a lot of time on that website. And,
the NHHFA.
and I know that they got a lot of stuff going on there. And B, it is not easy to navigate, sorry. But it strikes me that if the state's motivation, let me rephrase it. The state is more motivated toward helping developers of rental properties than they are developers of single-family units that are affordable, which is a different terminology than affordable housing. And it also strikes me that in the town of Jackson, I think we have to decide whether our primary focus is on affordable rentals or affordable single-family dwellings. And to me, if we're really talking about the future of the town of Jackson, trying to really attract magnetically some young people here to come move in and raise families, that we should make our primary focus on single-family dwellings. The tiny home thing is a great idea. That tiny home I keep talking about on Maloon, I don't think it's more than 30 by 10s, maybe 300 or 400 square feet.
The log home.
Right, but there's no one to say that the same company doesn't manufacture one that's not 1,200 square feet or 1,400 square feet with 2 bedrooms and a bath and something that could be a real legitimate starter home that could gain equity, be in a neighborhood, all the things that we want. But the rental thing, I just don't see it fitting into Jackson. I just
Well, I
don't.
also think that the people that own the amount of property that would take to build a rental community or something like that really value the fact that their land is either in land trusts already, or they haven't built something on it, or they haven't sold it. And I don't know, I think, I really tend to think that you're right. I think of my kids. My kids live in Illinois, and I would love to have them move out here. There's no way they would be able to afford to buy a house out here. And they both have good incomes. And
I mean, something, since you're the conduit to the Board of Select Board, don't take this the wrong way anyway, but for a town ready to throw $450,000 followed by another $5 million into a fire station that no one's 100% convinced that we need, what's the town willing to throw in, could add to this? Would you say it's more important?
I think they're both important, but I also agree with you that we need to come up with some ways, if they're not state approved, what can we do that's town approved to create incentives to people to create these either smaller affordable homes or whatever. We definitely have to put our money where our mouth is on that. And we are a wealthy town, but what else can we do?
And
Bring
but
people here.
to that point, I think what I saw at the town meeting, when the housing commission was established, and when we had our 25,000, or 50,000 dropped to 15, and I was 30 seconds away from promoting it to 25, to changing it to 25.
Yeah.
I was thinking this is not going to go at 50, and I got it.
Well, I'm the one who asked that to be 25 when you put it into the budget hearing, if you remember that, and I said, why
No,
15, why not 25?
we should have amended it to be 25
Whatever.
before the 15 came
Okay,
out.
I know, I was
But-
right, but just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't want to be sarcastic.
What I
but-
heard loud and clear, both from those that were against it and those that were willing to vote for it,
Mhm.
was that it's an impossible task in Jackson. And that it has, if we're gonna work on something, we have to work on it outside of Jackson because it's just simply not going to happen in
Yeah,
Jackson. I
let's
think
prove it.
that's where you get resistance to putting up cash if someone doesn't believe it's gonna work here.
But I also think that we're not trying to solve the entire problem on our own in the town of Jackson.
Mhm.
We're trying to help, and if we can set standards and create different rules and different tax, either tax credits or tax incentives or any kind of incentives, let's be the model community to do that. So Bartlett might follow, or, well, maybe not Bartlett, but Conway might follow, or any Tamworth, or any of the places just south of Conway too. I mean, if you want to go across the notch, you can afford to buy a house up in Berlin or Gorham, and there are going to be different school districts and different living accommodations in a different community than it is south of the notch. So why don't we be that standard to?
Right. I think you're right. I think once we define this further and decide what the 4 or 5 things we're going after, and a lot of them have been mentioned. There's conservation land, there's donated land, there's houses that haven't been lived in decades in this town. All these things present opportunities. What doesn't present an opportunity is the state's lending partners who, they're gonna really do you a great favor. They're gonna loan you money at between 6 and 8% with up to 2 points.
Right.
And they'll, might even kick in $5,000 from the state on your down payment. That's not affordable.
Doesn't make a difference.
That's nonsense. They're not partners, they're enemies.
Well, you can't even buy a car for under $50,000 nowadays for a new car. $40,000, $30,000. I go up. It should be, $30,000 to $40,000 to buy a vehicle, and you can get that for 2.5% or something like that, or less. But to buy a house, you're talking about that on top of a car payment, on top of having kids and all of that. It's overwhelming to me. I'm so glad I'm older. And I saved. Right?
Yeah.
I do want to, philosophically, I want people to own the equity of a house.
Mm-hmm.
However, after looking at the reports that the reports that are out there, and also just kind of thinking about it a little bit more, Jackson is situated in a it's surrounded by like seasonal work and places where it's tough to get to if you're coming from like even North Conway. If you work at Attitash or Wildcat or Great Glen or the AMC, sometimes living in Jackson could really make the difference. If you have like a little beater car because you can't afford a new car. And this is all coming from experience. And I think that there is a serious barrier to creating those family homes here in Jackson, either space-wise, and particularly right now, like there might be some hurdles that need to be gone over to be able to create a reasonable number of small family homes to actually move the needle in any significant way. However, it seems kind of like a little bit more low-hanging fruit where we could start with making Jackson a community that is more approachable for the single individuals or the couples that are willing to live in a 500 square foot small ADU, because those people eventually do create families. And
Then where do they go? Then families aren't going to live.
For sure.
Yeah.
Where do they go? But also, I think that it's so hostile to that kind of development here right now that if we don't start with that, then there's not going to be. You might get some families that move in here from somewhere else. That's a possibility. But I think that that's going to be a whole lot more challenging than having people who already live here. I met my wife in Jackson, Jake met his partner in Jackson. I know so many people who have met their significant others here in this town and are slowly moving away because they can't find housing here. Whereas if they could find housing here, you know, they maybe stay in an apartment for 5 years, and then 5 years down the line, maybe when this commission is more established, there's been some land that has been donated and acquired, and more has been done to maybe kind of change the regulation atmosphere in the town, then bigger things like family units and things like that can be worked on and kind of pushed through. I feel like it's just easier in the short term to work on things like these ADUs and you know, these small units, and then, you know, have a longer term goal being.
But I'll say this about that. I think you're right. And I think in the town of Jackson, there are people whose minds will never be changed. No matter what you do, they're not going to change. But I think they're in the minority. I think there's a big section of people my age. I'm 76 years old. There's a big segment of people my age who look down on all this stuff. But that's what we talked about in the last meeting. We need to market this concept to people. We have to decide what we're doing and market the hell out of it to everybody.
Present it the right way. You have to present to your audience. I mean, you're not
Yeah.
presenting to uneducated people that are going to not look through everything with deep thought. And there's not one right answer here too. You're right. You have to have certain opportunities for different populations and different age groups. But how much do you think, being younger for the two of you, how much do you think financial literacy and financial education is important for someone that is renting, that you say, what are your goals 5 years from now? Do you want to have kids? Do you want to own your own home? How are you going to do that? Are you saving for retirement even? Like, I'm an accountant, so my kids, I would be ashamed if they weren't saving for retirement, but that's the way I raised them. And I
But
don't
if you're
know if
working
kids have
2 jobs
Yeah,
just to
but-
pay the bills.
I know, but how do you educate that and say, you have to do something different? Maybe you go back to school. Maybe you figure, you know, you're not going to get out of this hole. So we will be seeing you move out in 5 years,
But-
because that's not your goal.
I'm not sure if this is what you're saying, but I think that if I were more financially literate, I will be able to afford a more expensive house because I'll be able to get a better interest rate. I'll be able to save up in the
You may not be able to afford to, but you may know what your goals can get you at that time. You may not want to save money. You may want to be living in the moment and go, you know what, if I can go to Starbucks every day and ski every day and do all this, I'm going to enjoy my life. That is your prerogative. But if you say you want to have a house in 5 years, and I'll say, here's what you can do to save, because I used to do financial counseling too. I'll tell you how to save every freaking penny and still have fun in life, and set you a budget to save money. So at the end of 5 years, working 2 jobs, busting your ass, saving up every penny, you may be able to have $20,000 in the bank for a down payment. And maybe that's your goal, and maybe it's not. But I think that having that knowledge and those resources, and who knows what the world will be in 5 years that might be more available.
Well, and the other resource is some of the help that NHHFA offers.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, a housing fair every year or 2 is not getting the word out.
No.
You know, I would hope that they've talked to every real estate agency, you know, in the state
Yeah.
to say, if you have people looking to buy, here's a way to help them buy.
Right.
Talking to every bank as well. But I think most people are probably completely unaware that that kind of assistance is even available.
I swear to you, I have this vision in my mind, and I'm not going to get it out. But I've thought through all the pieces, the finances, the banks, the town, everything. If everybody acts as a partner, this is doable. I swear to God, I would quit this committee tomorrow
Yeah.
if I didn't think this was doable. And
I
I really
agree.
think it's doable.
I
I've done
agree.
some unusual things in my life, but this one may be the toughest one, but it is.
Yeah, and to your point, I agree that bringing families in that own homes in Jackson is, you know, to me at least, our first and our highest priority. But if an opportunity comes up to do something like Ann Peterson's, 4 units,
I'm all over it.
I'm all
Right.
over that too. And
Anything.
I think what you guys are saying, it at least buys someone a little time. You know, if they have a place they can live in Jackson for a couple of years, even if they're married, maybe you can squeeze in a single kid, you know, in that kind of residence, but, you know, it buys them 5, 6, 10, maybe not 10, 5, 6, 7 years to find that unicorn, or, you know, figure out, or change jobs and have enough
Or
money to buy
finish an
something.
education, or go to a
Or-
trade school,
Or be
or.
40% of the housing commission. I think those people are.
Yes, absolutely. But this is why my husband and I built what we built. I mean, in my dreams, I would love to have my son and his wife, who are expecting a baby in January, I would love to have them live out here. They could have the space. They could save all the money in the world. It's not right for them right now, but that would be like a huge goal for me, because I know they could save so much money in 3 years. They would be able to find a house in this area. It may not be Jackson either. It may be Conway or Bartlett or something, but it also may be Jackson. And you know, that's something I see for my goals, so it can be done, and everything has to be considered, but it also has to be presented.
We haven't even, I don't even know if we have time today to go through it, but I did meet with the 3, I met with 3 of the hoteliers.
Yeah, no, let's kind of go back to our
Yeah.
schedule real quick.
Agendas are.
Where are we?
Just review the
I
minutes.
didn't print it.
Here we are.
Here, do you want
Trouble with
minutes?
my printer. I
Review
need to
of
report
minutes.
on my printer.
Minutes are here.
And I think Jonathan has one thing that he emailed about, right, about the
Yeah.
rules of procedure that we didn't indicate some of the sections.
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
had that
thing.
noted.
So I sent the updated version. I'm not sure if that is the updated version.
Right, oh, that's right. But I'd already sent the unupdated version to Julie, so
That's what I got in my hand.
I figured the proper process was to amend the minutes
All right.
here,
Yeah.
approve the amended version.
Cool.
And if you could make that a motion, just because I can't remember exactly what the issue is.
Can I make a motion?
Oh, wait a minute, you're not John.
No, I can make a motion.
Do you have what he said specifically? I don't have that.
No, I don't.
I can open the email there. Actually,
I can open
is
it.
there a good password that I can use to get the Wi-Fi?
I think I got it right here. And then, I don't know, can alternates make a motion?
I don't think so.
I don't think so
They're-
either, but I
yeah.
don't know specifically. I mean, it seems like they couldn't, but
Well, if there's a quorum with
Yeah.
everyone, so I thought if they were not voting members.
I guess that'd be like
there's
the
a
public
quorum.
making a motion.
Jonathan's email says, regarding the meeting minutes and the rules of procedure, I thought we discussed and agreed without voting to drop items E, F, G, and H from the duties and responsibilities.
Okay. So,
I make a motion to drop, what was it again?
to add them to the minutes.
E, F,
Drop, yeah, go for it.
G, and H?
E, F, G, and H.
E, F, G, and H.
Any discussion? All approved? Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. I love it when a plan comes together.
I'm not a voting member, correct?
I don't know.
Okay, well, tonight I won't be, just saying, I don't think I am.
So, do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Okay, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll send that to Julie, the amended version. Minutes are done. What's the next thing? St. George is the next thing.
Jake, do you want me to send you the video recording of the Zoom in case there's anything on that?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things on this.
Did you guys have a chance to go through my amended version of the rules of procedure?
No. I think I understood what you were making the changes to. I had gone through the initial one, so in my head I had an understanding what it is, but
I
I went through it, and I did not see any faux pas or anything else that had to be changed.
okay.
it'll be fun.
Why don't? Did you get a chance to go through them?
I did not get a chance. No, I think I missed that email. That's my bad.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we, if it's okay with you guys, why don't we vote? How would we put this? Conditional on the approval from you two after you've had a chance to review them.
Sure.
Okay.
Does that sound like something we can do, Barbara?
Conditionally approved, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, I'll make a motion that we approve the rules of procedure. Is that something that you want? to
I would
look-
love to see them, yes.
Okay.
I won't vote, obviously, but I would love to have them.
Okay,
Yeah.
so actually, before we approve them, what I'll do is I'll send them to the select board, the finalized version, but in the next couple of days, if you guys can take a look
Will do.
and let me know if you see anything that.
And we can, are we allowed to email and say that it all looks good, or should we wait until the next meeting?
I believe you can
You can
email
email.
me.
Yeah,
You
Okay.
just can't have
Email
any
the chair.
discussion about it.
Okay.
right.
Cool.
And really, going through it, I tried to note, I showed what I was removing and anything I was adding for anything substantive. But for stuff like changing New London to Jackson or, NLHC to JHC,
It was pretty self-explanatory.
I didn't note that stuff, but keep an eye out because I could have missed one or two.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you, Scott.
And so now I think we can return to our discussion that was next on the agenda.
Were we gonna, or we're not gonna vote on that now, we're gonna approve the,
No, what I'll do is I'll give you guys a couple days, let me know if you see anything that doesn't look right. If we're all good, then I will send the revised version to the select board to
sounds good.
approve,
Mhm.
and then we'll vote on it next meeting.
When is the next meeting?
So the next meeting, our regular meeting time and date is the third Tuesday at 6 p.m.
Okay.
On that note, I will be traveling on that day, so
All right.
you be chair.
Okay.
I will attend if I can via Zoom, but I think I'm actually traveling on that day.
Okay.
What's the date number?
It's the 16th.
And I can't make that one, so.
Do you know if Bob or Dick would be willing?
No, it's Bob and Frank, but.
Frank, oh,
Yeah,
Frank.
but no,
I have a hard time keeping track of the
And you
select
said
board
it-
because
I
there's a
know.
lot of that, in and out, in and out. So I apologize, Frank.
yeah, right. No, Frank.
Same thing with the planning
Frank
board.
actually said, why do we need all these liaisons? Why can't we get people from the general public to be on the board and represent and report back to us? I go, there are people from wouldn't that be just another committee member? So, anyway, here I am. It's at 6 o'clock, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make that. I have a chamber after hours thing, but,
The 16th, I'm returning on the 17th, so I may be able to do it by Zoom on the
Sounds good.
16th.
if you want me to set up a Zoom, let me know.
Let me see
Yeah.
where I'm gonna be at. I might be in a hotel in Iceland.
Ooh,
If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
well, we're actually just passing through Iceland.
Oh, okay.
We're going to Greenland, but
Cool.
Iceland is the only place that has an airport.
Iceland's on my bucket list.
Yeah,
Is Iceland on the way to Greenland?
It's the only airport that that goes to Greenland. I
Oh, wow.
believe.
Cool. That makes sense.
I'll be honest, my wife and I, well, we've been to Greenland a couple times, and we've always added a couple of days to our Iceland layover. And it may be because we're really just around Reykjavik, but we've never been super impressed by Iceland.
I've heard
Tell me
that.
that, you're blowing my bucket
No,
up.
but I've
It's pretty
heard that,
cool
I've
outside
heard
of
the
it.
pros and cons
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
but my brother loves it. I
Yeah.
mean, he actually, his son did a foreign exchange program
Oh, cool.
with a family in Iceland.
Very cool.
We're going on a safari.
That I will hold. I went on a safari real quick, we're kind of digressing here. I got sort of talked into a safari way back when, and I went thinking there's no way in God's green earth this could possibly be worth what it's costing me.
Mhm.
I mean, it's stupid expensive.
Mhm.
I came back thinking, sell the house, sell the kids, whatever it takes.
Moving in Africa.
We're doing safaris for the rest of our life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally almost here to you from
Yeah.
9 lions in a bush, or
That's so cool.
5 cheetahs on a kill, and you're in the back of an open pickup.
Whoa.
You could literally.
I'm doing a luxury safari, just saying. I'm not that
And a black
person.
box, yeah.
I'll be in Land Rovers and real, not tents, more like yurts and.
Well,
Yeah,
and
or
we
something.
actually
Yeah.
did a mix because we did it
Yeah.
last minute. And I will say that all of us, including young children,
Mhm.
decided that it was the more rustic camps that we liked best.
Yeah,
And the reasons were, number
Here
one,
they
the
are.
owner-operator is probably there doing something else.
right,
Videography, research,
yeah,
whatever. So they're there because they want to be there,
Yeah.
and they happen to have this camp that supports that activity. But having someone that manages the place that has that kind of knowledge is far superior than just a manager.
yeah,
I wouldn't trade a bucket of hot water for a shower generally, but
yeah,
you know, having a tent where there's no perimeter security,
Mhm.
and which is sort of you know, sort of made up anyhow. But having, you know, a giraffe eating out of the tree
Yeah.
above your tent when you
that's
wake up
what
in the morning,
we're kind of in that,
yeah.
yeah, I'll tell you all about it when we get back, because I've heard you can just hear the animals around your tent, and you're not allowed to leave it.
And then the one other thing that, you know, that I don't think I would have thought of beforehand was that in the more luxury ones, you know, they have real restaurants, you know, where you each have a
Yeah.
table and, you know, you eat,
Yeah,
you know.
no, this is all group setting, eating
Oh,
and
okay.
stuff, so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's,
That's what we liked about the rustic ones. You
Yeah.
all sit at the same table, so you're trading stories
Right,
about
right.
the day as you eat, not just,
Yeah.
you know, there's a
That's cool.
But anyway,
yeah,
housing.
okay.
So where were we in our discussion before we jump to the minutes?
I guess question for you is, did you want to reschedule the next meeting so that you could attend, or is that kind of counterproductive to being open to the public?
It's up to you guys. I think generally it's better to, I mean, over time, you know, we all are going to have meetings that we can't
Yeah.
attend for some reason or another, and, you know, kind of getting into the cycle of just dealing with that as we go. But,
Cool.
you know, we are a new commission, so I could go either way on that.
Fine, proceed as Nico's chair for the day.
Come on.
questions.
It's your time.
Yeah,
And I guess on that note, with Jonathan and I both being alternates, if we do vote on something, how do we decide which one of us becomes voting member?
Well, usually it's seniority, but we don't have that. So I think, yeah, paper, rock, scissors for the first one, and then we just alternate from there.
Okay, sweet.
Have we postponed the conversation this is our third meeting, on expanding the commission?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that would be us asking the select board. So there's,
I think, yeah, I mean, that's no problem. I think that with the new commission, you have to figure out what your sweet spot is of having people. And if you want to invite more and have more on the board, then absolutely.
Do you happen to recall how many people responded that they wanted to participate in the first place?
No, I think we
think you're
brought
looking at
everyone on. Yeah, I think we brought everyone on because we had the 3 members initially, and the fact that we got 5
Yeah.
responding, we decided 2 alternates would be perfect to have. But I mean, put it out there again, because I think that if it's something you want to do,
yeah.
I think that it's worth asking again.
And the
see
select
what
board
the
can
uptick is.
appoint up to 3 more alternates
Mhm.
without making any change to the, you know, the zoning.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I think I agree that having more people, especially if we can, you know, if there's any way to bring in someone that's a real estate agent or someone that's an attorney, to
Mhm.
have those kind of resources at the table would be great, but bodies, if not.
Yeah, I think that's great. So
So-
if you want to send something as a proposal to the select board and get on the agenda, maybe not for tomorrow, but for the next meeting in August.
I'm gonna ask my new next door neighbor, who's a real estate attorney, he just moved in from Massachusetts.
Oh, perfect.
Sorry,
Yep, get involved.
I'll ask him.
Great.
And then what we can do, I mean, obviously put it out in e-news and stuff, but you know, if there's any other way to talk to more people. You know, again, a lot of those people just, they're so busy with their lives, they're not even aware of things going on sometimes.
Especially with everything that goes out around election time, I think that, you know, when things are a little less flooded in the email, in e-news and stuff, you might get more people paying attention.
Makes sense.
Maybe not.
That makes sense.
And it's-
I feel like every time Nico and I are hanging out and we talk about the housing commission, did, like, we're both participating, someone's like, oh, wait, what is that? I want to go.
Right,
Which
and
cool.
then,
Like,
where are they? Yeah.
Yeah.
You should call them and offer to drive.
Totally. Well, a lot of them, like, they work.
Yeah, if we had pizza here.
I'm telling you, food, bring them in, gotta bring them in.
Yeah.
Or if we had a climbing wall right here, I think most of them are
There
busy
you
climbers that are trying to climb right now.
Yeah. Nice.
But they're also dirt bags.
They're-
Free pizza.
That's good point.
Yeah, you could hold a meeting at a little different place than this, you know.
Sorry, dirt bags.
You're among friends.
I was a dirt bag for a long time, so. So modified meeting minutes, what was the other, let's write down.
More members.
More members proposal. Okay. The couple of things that I'm working on was to go meet with Maggie and John Randolph tomorrow, to see what they're all about and see,
Mhm.
really, what would it take to get them to come up here and
Yeah.
do something. I'm also trying to look into a couple different properties. That one I mentioned that is, I'm not sure if it's under lien yet, but close to, according to Karen, she believes the owner, once he's ready to log it, then he'll pay his taxes and move forward. So that, kind of got, if the property to him is only worth the logging, which it kind of is because it's landlocked,
Yeah.
maybe there's a deal we could do with, there's a side, and I have to assume that there's some sort of deeded access, right of way to get to it.
Yeah, he's gonna have to get the logs off somehow.
Right.
Is that the one on Carter Notch Road?
Might be. I have to look at it. It's,
I think it is.
it's
It's gonna look ugly if they log that.
R13.
I drive by your house every morning.
Do you really? Do you bike, drive?
My car.
You're going?
Yeah. I go out and look for wild animals.
Yeah.
I do it every morning.
We used to
that's
do
cool.
that every time when we'd come up on vacation. We'd go driving around like, David, we sit on our asses every night. We never go out because we live here.
I ran into somebody at Shenandoah last week, and she walked up to me and she said, I went outside and you didn't drive by the house this morning. Is everything
Oh,
all right?"
worried.
Aww.
We had a
That's really
moose
cool.
living in our back right off of the Wildcat Trail for a little while.
I saw her moose 2 weeks ago.
Yeah?
On Moody Farm Road.
Yeah, that's where it is,
Wow.
right up there.
We have a mama bear, and 2 cubs, and
Yeah.
maybe a male as well. It's,
Cool.
I've seen one that looks bigger than a female to me.
Chief Purley mentioned that because he's been around a lot. Very friendly.
There weren't as
Yeah,
many
be
bears
careful.
around this year as last year by far.
Yeah.
There was the folks that my wife works for had their goats mauled by a bear a couple weeks
Oh,
ago.
no.
Yeah.
We see that.
Well, my brother has a sheep
Yeah,
gotten every once in a while.
Yeah.
He's a hobby farmer.
I know he is.
And if you really want to do it, get a dog.
Or a llama.
Yeah.
Hope he's not listening.
Was that the Tracy's house?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that's the
They're
bear.
bummed. Yeah.
yeah, that male, that one I think is a male.
Yeah.
I drove by, he looked over his shoulder and
Mhm.
just kept ambling. He didn't
Mhm.
seem to
Didn't even care.
care.
Wow.
Dogs were going crazy in the car, and
Yeah.
Whoa.
he didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
But
I'm really interested in any kind of tax incentives and credits that we
Mhm.
can propose and pass for long-term rental properties or any kind of development incentives or anything like that. And if it's not a tax credit, what kind of incentives can the town do without giving up too much revenue and, and incentivizing? And that,
Yeah.
I don't have any idea what to do on that, but with George's resources and even Sarah and stuff, I would love to know if there's anything we can do.
I've had some ideas. I don't know how feasible they are. I mean, some of them aren't really tax credits or incentives. But one thing, I mean, we're speaking of buying a home and getting people from rentals into homes that they own. I don't know if there's some way that we could either require people who are renting. I mean, I don't necessarily think requiring people to do something is a great idea because that's a disincentive,
Right.
but just making it easier for people who rent out homes to credit report for the people who are renting from them, so that, because I mean, we've been renting and paying our rent for, you know, our entire adult lives, and my credit score has not seen anything.
Any benefit from that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest, it's consistently the biggest bill that I have.
But why can't your landlord report that to the credit bureaus?
Because they
They
can,
don't
they
want
just
to.
don't. Yeah. Or it's too confusing for them, they're not sure. Like our current landlords, we asked them and they're like, how do you do that? And they're like, we didn't have an answer for them. So
Okay.
maybe some resources there. But also I was thinking more on the term of, on the side of incentives. We have a lot of, and this is again more leaning towards rentals, but there's a lot of seasonal work, and a lot of people who are maybe going to be looking for peculiar lease terms. So like somebody who works at Storyland that's only going to be employed here for 4 or 5 months. Maybe they're gonna have a hard time finding a 4 or 5 month lease.
Right.
And so maybe kind of in those shoulder seasons, there's some kind of credit that can be offered to people who are willing to make irregular lease terms to kind of like just cover their like heating, and maybe give them a little bit of a tax break for those, you know, just like kind of prorated for those months that they don't have people living in those
So like
units.
a part-time, long-term lease,
Well,
without
I
calling
mean-
it a short-term rental.
Well, because it's not
really
it's not
yeah.
short term
No,
because
that's
it
what
is
I'm saying.
longer than 30 days.
And you're marketing it really as a seasonal rental.
Yeah.
But for one person. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
one
for somebody
party, one party.
and for people
And
who
then
are
somebody's
working.
working. Yeah.
So like maybe they have somebody who is working for Attitash in the winter, and then they have a 1.5 month period where their house is empty
Right.
in April and early May
Yeah.
before Storyland opens, and they get somebody who moves in who works there or something like that.
Well, it's interesting this past year because the J1s that come in from wherever, any of the countries that they come in from, there were less sponsors this year. So I know Attitash and Linderhof did not sponsor kids this year. So they were looking for sponsors, which means you have to provide housing and pay a sponsorship
Right,
fee
did
for
that
them.
cash. It seemed like
In
most of
the
staff-
winter, not for the summer.
Oh, I see.
Yep, for the summer they didn't.
Huh.
So there were a couple of kids that I know Matty B's and McSheffrey wanted to bring back, but they couldn't sponsor them, so
Mhm.
they had no housing. So we don't want it to be J1s as much as we would like it to be local kids or local young people or local anybody to be here for those seasons. So
One other tax advantage that I liked that I heard from George was the idea of on home ownership holding the assessment constant
love
over a
that.
number of years. I love that idea.
Mhm.
Absolutely love it. I mean, that's the difference between building equity and not building equity, right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Just
And
to
you
clarify
could
this.
do it for as long as you have a long-term rental. I mean, honestly, or you have a scalable increase in the property value based on the home itself. Of course, it would have to increase, but not based on the fact that you have an ADU or a rentable unit. So you would still have to see some kind of tax increase based on, like for our purposes, I'll take as an example. Of course, our value is going to increase because property values are increasing in Jackson, but it didn't increase this much because we built a rentable unit. And you do keep that part of it separate. So I love that idea.
As far as tax incentives, I think we are limited to what we can do by the state. The state
Right.
has to, if we wanted to give a tax incentive on property taxes, we need authority from the state to do that.
Right.
But maybe it's sort of the same thing, I think the town could directly subsidize different things. I said Massachusetts is offering up to $20,000 a year to homeowners that, that full-time rent their unit. I don't know if the town would be, if we asked for 100,000 instead of 50, but the town knew that 100,000 was going to 1 or 2 new residents,
Mhm.
you know, I'm not sure if that would be more palatable than 50,000 to just, you know, do whatever we decide to do with.
Yeah, and again, I think that was one of the major points at town meeting, was saying, what are you going to use the money for?
Right.
If it's legal fees, or if it's tax incentives, or if it's, you know, helping with down payments, whatever. If that's spelled out and explained, you're gonna get the buy-in much better than saying, we just need some seed money.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
And
was the case at the
Exactly,
time,
and
but
it's hard, yeah.
Does the town,
that we got anything, actually, I'm
Yeah.
can the town be a landowner
They can.
for our purposes, for
well,
housing?
the town is a landowner.
For housing purposes, or their own?
They can do, I think the town can do whatever it wants with properties that it owns.
What's the town got for land?
And so that was my next thing.
Yeah,
There's not a lot.
yeah.
There are some condo units that can be developed out at Dana Place in some
But
weird,
it's not,
complicated
yeah,
fashion. I'm
it's
sure I
not
understand.
developable by us, and as long as Levine owns the property, there's nothing we can do with it.
Right. It would be
So it's
more of a,
Really weird.
can we attract someone that's willing to take the property from the town and do something with it?
Yeah, and he still has a first right of refusal on that.
And we control the association no matter what.
Doesn't Jonathan live there?
He does.
Yeah, he lives there.
He lives not at the Dana place, but the townhouse is, which is the
Well,
same
that's
difference.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
but there's not a lot of other property
So
that is.
the one other property
Mhm.
that may be totally not usable or not, is the old landfill.
Mhm. We talked about that at the last meeting.
And
Yeah.
I think that was closed in the 80s, mid-80s or so. The two test sites that they have on it both show PFAS levels below what's considered, you know, too high at the moment. But New Hampshire is going to increase its acceptable levels in the next couple of years, and so they would go from a little bit low to a little bit high.
And
There-
that has to be tested forever in.
And that land goes beyond the gate, right? Closer
yes.
to the house?
Yes, I believe so,
Yeah.
so. The other options are you can mitigate that
Mhm.
kind of thing with, you know, proper filtering systems. Possibly, we can, you know, if the well is as far past the gate as possible, you know, that might not be as affected, or even, you know, there's a way to set up a deal with the abutting landowner to
Right, that's what I was thinking.
to do a well on their
who was
property.
the
The
abutting
Forest
land.
Service might allow something as well, because I know up with Great Glen, Wildcat, both have water systems that that are draw from outside of their. They're obviously they're leasing the land from the Forest Service, but the water comes from outside of their lease area. So I don't know what that would look like, but that might be a possibility as well.
So I'm looking into that and contacting
Mhm.
DES to see what it would take to make that build, you know, what it would take to assess whether it's buildable, and then whether that's possible or not. That would be the easiest thing. It's a nice little property.
Mhm.
Wouldn't hold a whole lot because a lot of it's super steep, and
One is a gain, one house is a gain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Better
other than
than-
that, we own little bitty parcels here and there that are
yeah.
not sellable or buildable for anything.
Should we meet with Kevin Bennett and find out what he knows about houses that are essentially abandoned? They're owned by someone,
Yeah, actually, I'll invite Kevin to the next meeting.
but there's a lot.
Do you
And
think
when do
he'll
we?
know? Just kidding. Kevin knows anything about it, I guess.
There's
He'll know as well as any individual in town. I think
No.
in the end, you make an inventory of what you think might be
Yeah.
close to abandoned,
It's a good place to start.
and then you just start contacting the owners to see.
And then at some point, we gotta schedule the hotel use.
Yeah.
One of these meetings.
Yeah, I think about,
Ken interviewed 4 or 5 hotels.
I met with Henry Sirois from the Wentworth, and that went well. Plus, I know the owner. I met with Mark LaHood, who owns Thornhill, Christmas Farm, Whitney's, and not only did that go well, and not only are both he and Henry interested in attending our meetings, some kind of roundtable, but Lahoud owns the cottage on Valley Cross where his chef lives. He also owns 2 other homes, small cottages, and he has land that exists behind the swimming pool, between the cottage on Valley Cross, coming down the hill. So that he might be willing to do something with.
Wow.
So, of course, me being a big mouth, I looked at him and said, "You willing to donate that land?"
Of course, why not start
And
somewhere?
he said to me, "Well, we've only known each other for 15 minutes, but I'll consider it."
And then he pulled out a cigarette.
But, and I also,
Sorry.
I also met with Joe Barrasso from Eagle Mountain House.
That might even go over the youngsters.
I was gonna say, they probably don't know what I'm talking
No,
about.
there's-
but-
Just took me a second, but.
Yeah,
A couple of interesting things.
In a world without cigarettes, it's
yeah,
Yeah, we vape these days, but it's same difference.
don't be.
Wentworth has, excuse me, I hate wearing glasses, has staff lodging for 10 staff. And they get breakfast and they get access to a kitchen completely for their use. Eagle Mountain has a similar thing, existing housing for 10 staff. I don't know what the bennies are, but they got it. So,
Where does this staff live? Is it on-site or off-premises?
on-site,
On-site.
on-site. I think it's in the new, is it in the, you might know, is it in the new function hall that they built
I
there?
don't think there's any
I
housing
think there's
there.
a building.
Oh, so they built dedicated staff quarters
Oh.
as opposed to just using
Yeah.
some of the rooms.
Use the hotel.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. They're never gonna use their rooms, that would be crazy.
Well,
Well-
if you're at a point where you can't
If you can't fill
keep
the
them all
rooms,
open because you
too.
don't have enough
Well, they got
staff.
96 rooms, Wentworth has 61, and Thornhill has about 80. Now, somebody should have asked me, how come you didn't approach all the other inns? And I did, but the real reason is they don't have restaurants and function facilities,
Right.
big function, they just,
It makes
They're-
sense to start with.
they're important, but they don't really fit into a round table.
Mhm.
And Malik goes his own way, so I left that off the table too.
Well, and he's already doing something.
Yeah,
Right, right.
Which brings up one other possible grease to these types of projects is, is the town willing to consider somewhat lower road standards? You know, where frontage is required for the development. And so,
Yeah.
For example, Mike is somewhat limited to what he can do
Yeah.
because of the town standard roads.
where does that fall, under the planning board or under the board of selectmen?
Planning board and the zoning board probably,
Yeah.
right?
You know, it can be a slippery slope where you're,
Mhm.
you know, approving roads that are not built as well as they should be.
Mhm.
A point made at the planning conference a couple weeks ago, I can't remember who it was that made it, it might have been Ben Frost or George, is that, you know, we should not be accepting even town standard roads. That he was saying, because when a road has to be maintained by an association,
Mhm.
that almost always runs into some sort of problem at some point. You know, his point was that if you're gonna allow it, the town should take the road right up front.
Yeah,
But because
we
that
run into
requires a
that.
town vote.
But then
Yeah.
you gotta build it to town specs for the town.
right,
too.
and then we've been running
The
into
fire?
that with.
Well, it'd be a
culvert
cost to the
issues.
town to build a road to town specs.
Yeah.
Right.
We've been running into that with some culvert issues on
Yeah.
some private roads that
Right.
the town.
I would so love to
Doesn't-
avoid that. That's just another negative.
Well, I know the other thing is it's tough because part of our roads are town roads and part are state roads. So we're
Mhm.
really handcuffed when it comes to
But
state.
It was more just, isn't it
roads,
all
but-
feasible to reduce the standards,
Mhm.
not reduce safety and et cetera, and make it a little less costly for a developer to, you know, to build a road so that they have the frontage to develop.
Mm.
I say last resort.
Yeah.
Anyway, the meetings were good. They're all interested
Good. That's
and
neat.
they'd all attend.
Cool. And that's where, you know, Wood, you know, the couple that have houses, and Eagle built dedicated housing, but is Wentworth dedicated, or are they using rooms? Are they using
I think
rooms
they're
that
using
used to-
rooms because
Yeah.
Fritz and I were pretty good friends, and Fritz used to tell me he had about 70 rooms.
Yeah.
And they just told me the other night they only have 61, so my guess is they've moved some rooms.
So, for a business like that, it might make financial sense to, to donate into a housing trust or a land bank.
Well, that's the whole subject for the roundtable, is to lay that stuff out
Right.
to them. Now, what are you willing to do?
Right, but, the challenge is, especially when it's multiple employers, obviously they're not gonna buy into it unless they know that their staff is getting housing out of it. And, managing multiple participants, so they each feel like they're being treated fairly in terms of the housing that they get. And then also, how do you deal with people that find another job?
And move?
Do you force them out or not?
Don't think I haven't considered that one too.
Well,
I don't have an answer, but
I
I
think
think
you either do that or they probably pay fair market rent. And, then you're collecting money on it, but do you have to go one way or the other. You really don't want to lose that unit because then you're losing an employee too. So it's probably gotta be part of that stipulation that they have to work for you. Or you
I
say
think it
it's gonna
does,
be.
it's just, it's a difficult, because the town really just wants residents, and of course they get
Yeah.
that either way.
Yeah.
As someone who's dealt with employee housing and being kicked out because you are choosing a different job, I think we should steer away from.
I mean, as an
Something
employer,
where-
I'd be hesitant because I don't want someone working for me simply because they get housing out of it, even if they hate the job. kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But, I just am sort of
That's a tough
every
one.
Yeah.
stone.
I don't know if our employers look at this as, I don't think the three that I talked to look at Jackson out in a way other than a romantic getaway place, blah, 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 you see in a travel guide. What I don't think they want to see, any of them, is Jackson become an inn in an Airbnb town, and that's it. Okay, no residents, no locals, no nothing. I really believe they don't look at it that way. I know for a fact Wentworth doesn't, because the owner's my son's brother-in-law. I know, was with him on Father's Day.
Well, they don't want the competition, and they want a town that people want to visit.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that's,
they're not, it's funny, they all do about the same, well, relatively speaking. They're all doing well. Wentworth's business has increased this year. The other two are down a little bit this year. Oh yeah, I did go to Wildcat too, but that was the day they fired their whole staff, so
Oh,
that
Jesus.
didn't work out too well.
But,
Something's going on there, I don't
but
know.
when you say up and down from compared to what, just the previous year?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's been so crazy with even wedding seasons type of business, how it's changed over the last 3 to 4 years since COVID. I hate the COVID factor, but that's why it's so weird to compare just this year to last year, where last year might have been an anomaly in certain industries. So that's why I asked.
I think, look, everybody wants to outcompete the other guy. I want all the best weddings, I want them all this. But in this time today, I think those three in particular, I think would see each other as allies
I agree.
less than they would see them as enemies.
You know why? They're 3 very different venues.
Oh, yeah.
All of them, not even just the 3, but even Thornhill. Thornhill, Christmas Farm, and Whitney's are 3 completely different venues. And Eagle is very different from that, and Wentworth is very different from that too. They all have their different
play the
appeals.
same music.
But he hasn't
No, they
even-
don't. You weren't at my daughter's son's wedding. They played AC/DC all night, and we had.
He hasn't even decided what he wants to do with Whitney's yet. Whether he wants to
Really?
use
Yeah.
it strictly for barn weddings or so.
Excuse me, but even though they're different, to your point, collectively, they make Jackson a wedding town.
For sure.
And so
Which is
they
a-
promote the town, and so they all benefit from that.
Right. So that they could come to the Kissing Bridge. B. Davis would never
Oh
call
my
it the
God, the honeymoon bridge! I know.
She
How
would
about
never
that?
call it the honeymoon.
That's not the honeymoon bridge.
Well, if Jackson could, rent out the bridge in Jackson Falls as
I like that.
No.
photography settings.
No, no. People, I mean, there are so many people that don't even like the bridge dance.
I have a
Really?
friend who owns a house in York Beach.
Why?
It's so much fun
Right,
because
if you stand on the lighthouse in York Beach, look over your left shoulder, there's 5 very modern houses there, and he owns one of them right in the ocean. And so many people asked him if they could take their wedding pictures there with the lighthouse in the background, that now he rents it out.
seriously,
Really
it's
smart.
awesome.
It's hilarious. Last time I was there was a wedding party waiting for the previous wedding
Are
party
you
to leave.
serious? That's
Well, if
crazy.
you look at what you're paying for the photographer,
No
kidding.
kidding,
Yeah.
my
I
God.
mean, the moment you put wedding as part of the term, wedding
See,
dinner, wedding
yeah.
photography, wedding dress, 10 times.
Tell you what, it's because the clients, you earn it with the clients.
No, I'm sure you
But
do.
I'll tell you, when my son and his wife got married at the Wentworth a year and a half ago, it was way cheaper than anything in Chicago. Like by far cheaper, so they were thrilled to get married up here. They were very smart about things too, as far as having a smaller wedding. Anyway,
This number is gonna have to go out.
Okay.
I got some people at the house.
I really appreciate being part of this commission.
Yeah, we
It's,
appreciate it.
yeah, it's
We appreciate
very
it.
interesting. Such a hot topic.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited for next time Jonathan is here because he really spearheaded us reading those reports, and I don't think we're solving anything that other towns aren't facing. I think that if we just read the reports and look through proposed solutions, we'll find a lot of good there.
But I just want to be trendsetters too. I don't
I
want
do.
to say, I don't want to be the town that says, we've always done it this way and we need to keep our values and we need to keep our culture and everything, because we can still keep that and attract new people. We're not trying to bring 500,000 people here.
Totally.
We're trying to help some people.
And we
also.
are watched. We are watched.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
Many of the
You look at-
communities
yes.
see us as really the tip of the spear when it comes to these issues. And so Pete Nichols at the New London, you know, he's keeping a close eye on us.
And even though you don't like the short-term rental ordinance, we are copied so frequently on the level that we did our short-term rental ordinance, and we're not doing it like North Conway, which has been to court so many times already, and we did it what we thought was the best for the town as far as regulation and
And staying out of
monitoring,
the
and
court.
we've learned.
And staying out of the court.
Yes, not good on that one, but, yeah, I wanna be that town that people say, ooh, look at what they did. They're small, their reputation is this, this, and this, but they still solved a few problems.
And
Well, I know one thing, we only had one baby born in the town of Jackson last year.
I know,
Well, if you just look at the number of subdivisions we do, we haven't had a real development
No,
for 20 years, probably. You know, something
the
like
one over
Eagle
there
Brook.
at the brook, what's it called?
Eagle Brook.
Eagle
Yeah.
Brook.
Yeah, that's my vision is, you know, a development like Eagle Brook, but not tiny homes, but, you know,
Yeah.
maybe 1,500
modest
foot.
homes,
You
yeah.
know, a home that a family would be happy in, even if they,
Yes.
you know, had a dream of getting something bigger, they still could make
You've
that
gotta
work.
start
That's my
somewhere.
dream.
Yep.
That's what I think.
And I think to some degree, younger generations are happier with less in terms of that
Yeah,
sort of thing. Or at least that's the, you know, the philosophy, I guess.
Listen, I bought a house that's 3 times larger than I need, with my wife and me and 3 cats. But that was all that was available in Jackson, and I wanted to get off the mountain. I couldn't take the short-term rentals anymore, otherwise it might have been an assassination.
Well, why are you renting out a few of your rooms then?
I'm sorry?
Short-term rental room.
I said, why no long-term rentals?
You know, my house lends
I'm
itself.
kidding.
It lends itself to that. There's the lower level, which is my room.
Yeah,
You know, it's got a bedroom, a kitchen, a
yeah,
desk, a gym, storage, it's got everything.
yeah,
But I like it.
I know, I hear you, I totally hear you.
Me too. I mean, I'm off a secondary road, off a long dirt road, off a long driveway off of that.
One that you definitely don't want paved, we know that.
And besides, I want to see somebody happy in their home with their family.
Yeah,
I really feel a responsibility about that. I've lived in this valley a long time, and I just feel that nobody really focuses on that I have seen. This is the first group of half.
Well, and it's because it's the toughest nut of, you know,
Mhm.
the whole housing thing is that.
Yeah.
Well, we're a bunch of tough monkeys. We're gonna get this nut cracked.
Right,
Yeah.
and I don't think we really have the option of doing, you know, a large apartment building or
Right.
something like that, something more directed at exclusively transient.
Honest to God, if we got some land, not even a lot of land, and just built 2 or 3 houses on it, figured it out,
Mhm.
people would be flocking toward this town to talk to the Jackson Housing Commission.
Yep.
Well, and it would also give us greater legitimacy
Exactly.
within the town.
Exactly.
I think getting that one success,
Mm.
you know, is a lot more than one success.
I wasn't even interested in the dump, I call it the dump, the old dump land, but now I am. When you mentioned it the last time, I've been up there like 4 times. And I look at it and I look at it, and if you can get over the stigma of it being a former landfill, and you can get the approvals for the land and the drainage and all the other stuff, bingo.
We could even double down and make it a manufactured home, put one on there.
There you go.
And then, and you know, if it's really, really nice, and that's kind of one thing I was thinking is, if you get that one unit in here that is a manufactured home and kind of is like, people can see it and like know the people who live in it, and then suddenly that stigma is getting broken down, and then maybe, you know, a couple years down the line, then that can change in a town meeting, and instead of being kind of 50-50 borderline whether it would be approved or not, it might be a better 75-25 chance because people have started to accept that stuff.
Well, and to that point, you know, Ann Peterson was, as I think George mentioned, there was a lot of inspection of what was going on, if not,
Yeah.
you know,
A lot.
resistance. And now that it's built, I think very few people have
Mhm.
a real problem with it
Yeah.
because they're very nice looking.
Certainly not the people that live there.
Pretty happy there.
You know, these modular homes or prefab homes or whatever you want to call them, a lot of the high-end houses are even proposing them because material costs are so high and so hard to get. They're making these pre-manufactured walls
Mhm.
and roofs and trusses and things like that. So it's not just the smaller modular or manufactured homes. You wouldn't even know. Lisa Baumgartner's house, the author, the big beautiful house up on whatever the name of that road is, was prefab walls. I mean,
Well, you know,
don't
George, you know Bob Carter?
Mhm.
He's a developer, he builds those enormous timber homes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're all pre-cut. The
Right.
whole thing is pre-cut.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
The homes sell for
Pretty much Lincoln
$2 million.
lots.
again, yeah, exactly. But again, it's presentation and knowledge of what you're telling people.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to say before I go back to my thing, because you reminded me, is credit reports. And I don't think people understand, one of my things my dad always told me is protect your credit because it goes with you forever, no matter where you move or live. And that education to younger people saying, protect your credit. And I will do whatever I can to find some research about how to get your rental history on your credit report and find out a way to do it. If there's a form or some way for your landlord to do it, I'll get it back to you and let you know, because it's huge, makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
In lending abilities, people just respond to you immediately.
The other best thing you can do, we talked about this before, is get a credit card and pay your
Yep.
bill on time every single
Every
month.
single
And
month.
you
Use it
watch,
for your
after about
haircut.
6 months, all of a
Yeah.
sudden your credit line will go up.
Absolutely.
Isn't that amazing?
And don't
Yeah.
make big purchases on it, just,
No,
you know,
but do
like a
your-
haircut or something.
Or
just-
your gas.
Just
I mean,
something
buy
like
your
that.
gas with a credit card and then pay it off when you get home. I mean, honest to God. Plus, if you get one even with rewards, you'll benefit from it too. But pay it off and just create credit.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Mhm.
I'm a financial counselor, I'm a CPA, I'm an accountant, everything. If you ever have questions or think you can get an audience of people together that I can help, I would love to help people set up budgets, do anything like that.
I think one of the fun conversations I had with some friends on hike recently that just bought a house was like, how do you buy a house? And they walked us through the process and I was
Oh
like,
my
I had no idea.
God.
It
Yes.
was such an arduous task.
Absolutely.
The finances are like just scratching the surface, but it's a big
Yep.
part of it.
And you have to consider everything, the insurance, the property taxes, the mortgage,
Yeah.
the HOA fee if you have one,
Totally.
and your landscaping. And I have spreadsheets out the wazoo for all
Oh
that
my
shit.
God.
It's
In
not
taxes
gonna-
that, you know, you can't count on being a single value, so you have to add that
Mhm.
addition as it goes on.
I hate to say it, but can I make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second it.
I'm in favor either.
All right, we'll
Thank
see
you
you,
all so much.
maybe not see you next month. But we'll convene here the 16th. Nico will be running the meeting.
What time is
I'm in
6?
I like it.
What time is 6?
Now we're back to 6 o'clock, right?
And Ken, we'll see you at the dump throughout this month.
Hey, do me a favor, will you walk over there and see if there's a name on that manufactured home, on that log home?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
I feel kind of funny parking my car and getting down and walking around someone's house.
Yeah, so it's the best place to get down to the swimming hole is like to walk right through the yard. Which,
All
If
right.
anybody stops you, just say your name is Scott Bagger.
it's Jacob Campbell.
Exactly.
I love the Bensons.
All right, everybody, have a good
I hope
night.
your friend
you
is
too.
better, Ken.
Pardon me?
I hope your friend is better.
Yeah, that's, it's gonna be a tough one, but I get.
What kind of cancer?
Prostate.
Wow.
But he's been treated, he goes back and forth, he owns a house in Miami, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
In Antigua, the hospital's not this nice.
Wow.
I've been in it, it's not that great.
That's Antigua.
Yeah.
Scott, do you want me to just leave this here?
The box.
It's just a
The
small
box
town.
and the agendas and minutes. You
Yeah.
want it?
See,
I'll recycle these.
Yeah.
The box is, are those reports you guys have.
Oh.
Oh, you are so good.
You got it.
Those reflexes were
We got that
awesome.
on film
Like,
right there.
he pushed it, didn't he?
Yeah, we did.
Are we supposed
It was actually me. I pushed it off and then I saved it.
I am the same.
Thank you, Hank.
Turn it up. Night, Hank.
You know,
Oh my God. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Let's see if there's a power button for the start stop.